is on West New Hampshire and West Marks.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Southern Pines Town Council meeting. I will call our Tuesday, March 11th meeting to order. If you'll please join me to stand and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. All right, we will start with our town manager's comments. Manager Parsons.
Thank you, Mayor Clement, members of council, and the public. 3 items on your consent agenda this evening. The first being a code revision to permit off-premise alcohol sales at our local farmers markets. You'll recall this was a code change that we discussed in length at the work session last month, and staff's put together a version of it based upon council feedback. The second is to authorize the execution of an NCDOT utility relocation agreement. This has to do with the utilities along US 1 and 15501 that need to be relocated as part of the DOT project, putting in the super street that has been talked about for a number of years down there. The town is required to pay 25% of that cost. And then finally, a series of minutes for approval. You've got 3 public hearings this evening, and legislative staff will discuss each of those as we open them. And then finally, 2 action items that we're asking for some council feedback on this evening. The first being the dedication of Southern Road, which of course is the extension of Southern Road that for a long time sort of dead end after you went between what is now Kohl's and the Outback site. So this is the extension out to the new parkway that runs in front of the BJ's Wholesale Club. And that is being recommended for dedication for public use and maintenance moving forward. And finally, a resolution opposing NC Senate Bill 382, and specifically portions of that bill related to the zoning authority of local governments that I'm sure you'll hear just a little bit more about when we get to items 6A and 6B on this evening's agenda. With that, I'll take any questions and hand it back over to you, Mayor.
One.
Yeah, I had a comment. If council's okay, I would like to remove 5A from the consent agenda and just have it discussed briefly. I know Assistant Town Manager Roth did a great job. Just if anybody wasn't watching our work session, just a brief statement about what that is. I just want to make sure that it's very clear what that one is doing. So if you're okay, thank you.
I'm going to move that down from 5A down to 7C. Is that okay with you all? Okay. Any other questions on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
To approve the agenda with the movement of 5A to 7C.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
And all in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to public comment, I know we have several people from the public here to speak on some of our legislative hearings. If you are speaking on the landscaping and tree protection amendment, the character districts, or the conditional zoning district for Indiana Avenue, if you'll wait until those hearings come up. I think we have 2 people for a general public comment. Anyone else, just stand after that and introduce yourself. We'll start with Marco Rotting.
I'm waiting on the rezoning.
Okay. And then how about Mark Moen? Same as well? All right. Is there anyone else with a general public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to our first legislative public hearing, we have OA-03-24, the landscaping and tree protection amendments. I think we have Planning Director Grieve to speak. Do you want to go ahead and speak on both that and Z-04-24, both?
Mayor Clement, it would be my pleasure.
Thank you. I know we're sort of in the same boat with both items 6A and B, correct?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am. BJ Grieve, Town of Southern Pines Planning Director. You may recall these 2 agenda items, 6A and 6B, came before you at the December 17th, originally at the November Town Council meeting. They were heard and continued to the December 17th meeting. And at the December 17th Town Council meeting, they were continued to this evening. Why were they continued for 90 days? They were continued for 90 days because the North Carolina legislature had passed what was called Senate Bill 382. And Senate Bill 382 included a provision that expanded the definition of downzoning to include anything that creates a nonconformity. Now, the challenge with in addition to that, the language of the downzoning provision already existed that you had to get written consent of any landowner prior to downzoning their property. But now you had to get written consent prior to downzoning, and downzoning included adoption of any regulation that would create a nonconformity. Well, the thing about nonconformities is, if I may very, very briefly, the thing about nonconformities is that nonconformities have always been one of the tools that local governments and planners use to make sure that a new regulation adopted today, a new restriction on property that's adopted today, doesn't apply to properties in the past. So if we say, for example, we have a parking standard that the minimum requirement is 10 and the standard changes, the minimum requirement is 15, all those that met the 10 standard previously are now non-conforming, but the non-conformity provision means you can continue to exist that way. You don't suddenly have to expand your parking lot to meet the new minimum. So it was like a pressure valve to make sure that as you move forward with regulations, all those previously approved projects don't have to come into compliance overnight or even within a certain amount of time. So it's already been the pressure valve. And so it was an interesting adaptation of what is non-conforming, sliding it into what is now downzoning, which is, historically speaking, carries with it a slightly different definition, a different purpose and intent. So the challenge was that these two agenda items were phase one implementation of our comprehensive plan that we'd been working on for about a year. And one of the three projects line up on a spectrum of how much they're affected by a prohibition of anything that creates a nonconformity. The character districts almost exclusively create new standards that will create nonconformities because they're looking to keep Southern Pines Southern Pinesy by requiring certain things that were identified as character-defining architectural and site design features by making sure those things are in future projects. So commercial development downtown would need to have a front porch or other design elements. So anything that doesn't have that would be a nonconformity, but it doesn't have to comply. It just moves forward. But if you can't create any nonconformities, we can't adopt those character district standards. So I took that one and set it aside, can't do it. The next one was amendments to our landscaping ordinance. And the amendments to our landscaping ordinance were really designed to try to make, there were a number of things in there, including contributions from arborists, contributions from private sector, contributions from those who were looking to enhance the landscaping standards. And there were enough provisions in there where, hey, some of the things were loosening of our landscaping code because there was too much. There was too much landscaping in a small area. So some of it was calling for a reduction in the total volume of landscaping. But there were a few of the things where we needed to tighten it up, so that would have created some nonconformities. So that was kind of in the middle of that spectrum. And then on the end of the spectrum was the tree protection ordinance. The tree protection ordinance is primarily about process, so we still feel confident that one could be made to work, but it would need to be gone over. And so at the last time we met, there was a discussion on the record about what to do about these for now. And it was decided that looking at another continuation, because the legislature is looking at this. We continue to get conflicting reports almost daily of what the likelihood is that the legislature, this is statewide, we're not the only jurisdictions dealing with this, and in fact it's big news right now across the state about how local jurisdictions are realizing this affects them. I'll give you a small example. A jurisdiction that just adopted a new comprehensive plan and wanted to adopt a new zoning ordinance to implement that plan, that new zoning ordinance creates standards that are tighter and more restrictive than the previous one that hadn't been updated since 2007. And that has to come to a stop. So there's other jurisdictions that are dealing with this. But in the meantime, not knowing if something will happen to change the statute we've been talking about, to change it back, or to change it in some way that might allow these to be workable, or won't change it at all, and we need to go back to the drawing board with these. We don't know enough right now. We just simply aren't, it's too speculative. So moving forward with something would be premature at this point. So staff's recommendation is another continuance, and I have spoken with our town attorney as well as with Elena, the project manager for this, and we are in agreement as staff that 90 days would be an appropriate continuance because it gets us to June, and by June, we think we'll probably have more information. 30 days probably won't be enough. 6 months might be a little too much, so we're falling in about the 90-day. That's our recommendation.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions?
What's our June date? What's the meeting date for June? I don't have it from.
Tenth?
All right. And I'll make a motion that we continue these hearings that are open, that they be continued, both OA-3-024, as well as Z-0424 and OA-0424, to the June 10th, 2025 general business meeting.
Second.
Are there any questions before we vote? Any other comments?
I just have one question. The agenda has called, and I think largely we refer to it as a tree protection ordinance, and then the agenda calls it a tree protection amendment, and then the memo says open space amendments. Just want to verify there's no changes to open space. It's just the tree protection in the open space.
Yes, sir, that's correct. Thank you for that clarification. I apologize for the different wording. Yeah, we'll try to tidy that up next time around.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we will revisit this in this meeting, towards the end of the meeting, when we talk about Senate Bill 382 and just some actions that we're attempting to take to get some guidance on how we move forward.
If it pleases the council, I'll continue to pass along any information we learn at my monthly time with you at the work session.
Yeah, it's been very helpful. Thank you.
Also offer that in the event, if they worked this all out next week, there would be the ability at a next meeting or something to
Move forward.
kind of revisit when to place it on an agenda and move forward. So
Necessary notice in order to be able to do that.
I do not have that right off the top of my head, but I would think because you are in the midst of a continued hearing, could they not, for instance, purely hypothetical, do not expect this whatsoever. If we meet in 2 weeks at work session and something got all worked out and it looks like we could move forward because they would be in a regular meeting being the work session, they could reset this hearing to April or May, should they so decide.
Okay.
So it's just something you would want to do in an open meeting at a future.
Right.
Setting
Okay,
it
so at
for a
work
future
session, we
open
could
meeting.
reset it. Okay, great.
Perfect.
Manager's optimism. A week, 2 weeks? Wow, that's-
Again, hypothetically. I'm just trying to avoid having all of this and all that budget stuff in June, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right, that's all right. All in favor for the continuance? Aye. Any opposed? No, thank you.
Yes, indeed, thank you.
Okay, moving on to item C, which is Z-07-24, the conditional zoning district rezoning for 4.13 acres on East Indiana Avenue. What I would like to do is have staff do a presentation first, and then we'll have the public speak. Does that sound okay with you guys? Okay. Director Grieve, is that you as well? Welcome back.
When's petition?
Gee.
Oh, did I call you doctor, director?
I could go for doctor. Why not? Yeah.
Extra letter in that one.
A super fast PhD you just received.
Medical doctor, councilperson Peterson? Yeah, MD.
Specialized.
Good evening,
Good
members of
evening.
council. BJ Grieve, Town of Southern Pines Planning Department. I have the pleasure this evening of presenting to you a conditional zoning district called Hunt Cliff. This is file number Z0724. This is a conditional zoning district. The council is familiar with what a conditional zoning district is. We've been doing a number of those recently. For the sake of those in the audience, staff's job with the planning staff's job is to receive applications for development, process those according to various processes that apply to different types of development, prepare reports, set agenda items for the planning board, followed by the town council. And basically what we do is we write a staff report that is like a research paper. We try to work out a lot of the fine details that we feel are missing or that are adequately addressed, point things out. We try to get that all resolved. We go to the planning board makes a recommendation. We take the planning board's recommendation, and we attempt to work those things out further with the applicant. And then we deliver those things to a public hearing before you this evening. And then we present, the applicant will present. We don't advocate for the project. We don't advocate against the project. We sort of just call it like it is and try to implement the comprehensive plan for things like a rezoning that calls for consistency with that plan. So Hunt Cliff, conditional zoning district, as you know, is like a rezoning that you can condition. It used to be back in the day, you could rezone, let's say, from RS2 to RS1, but if you did that, you could do anything in RS1, even if the applicant came in and said, no, I promise I'm only going to do this density, or I'm only going to do this use, or I'm only going to do this, you couldn't condition it. So over time, the concept of using a conditional zoning district where you can rezone it, but only with very specific conditions for very specific things, became in vogue, and it allows more design control in a legislative process like this. So with that, that's what this is. Hunt Cliff has a really interesting history going back to 1963. This property that we're going to be looking at this evening is 4.13 acres, and it is this portion right there in the green box on the right side there. That is Indiana Avenue on the south side, or planned south side. It's actually the east side of the subject property. And what we're going to do now in the next slide is we're going to rotate that property. You can see the north arrow right next to, just east of, plan east of 3 in 1963. The north arrow is pointing off to plan right. We're going to rotate that now so that the north arrow is up and orient the property like we're used to seeing it. So the properties were platted going back to 1963. The subject property, 4.13 acres, is both one lot in the Sandhurst development as well as another portion that was not platted as a lot. In 1981, it was platted as Hunt Cliff, and you can see the approximate layout of the lots at that time. They proceeded with development of the subject property with the middle portion, that portion platted right there. That portion was platted in March of 1982, and I would love to take a pause here and just share for those of you that are just maniacally into American fiscal and monetary history, fiscal policy and monetary policy history. March of 1982 is possibly the worst imaginable time in U.S. history to be selling houses. So mortgage rates were at 17%. And so the fact this was even platted in March of 1982 is rather remarkable. Instead of Hunt Cliff, it could have been called Monetary Cliff, because it was not a good time to be doing any of that. Paul Volcker was under a lot of pressure. So the project did not move forward. In other words, 6 houses were the original project, but the portion Plan North and Plan South was not developed. In 2011, another developer came along and took that portion Plan South and put in a little cul-de-sac there and did a conditional zoning district, same thing as what's before you this evening. But in the process of getting that conditional zoning district approved, actually donated the north portion to the town as an addition to the Sandhurst Park. And this development also did not move forward. Now, 2011 was not nearly the monetary circumstance that 1982 was, but it didn't move forward either. So the property continued to sit there. Hunt Cliff does have an HOA, does have CC&Rs, does have all that on the record. There are 6 homes there. There are 2 attached units and 4 units and 2 attached, as well as 2 detached. This project did not move forward. And so the properties, that portion that was to be dedicated to the town was never dedicated to the town because the south portion was never developed. So the current applicant, Ryan Pascal, 15 Pine Cones, did acquire the subject properties. And when I say the subject properties, it's that portion on the north side and the portion on the south side, on either side of that middle piece. And so what we have now, there we go. The current proposal is to develop the north portion and the south portion with 11 dwelling units. Now that's been, I want to stop there because that's been a bit of a discussion about whether it's 11 structures that could be either single-family or duplex, which would result in either 11 to 22 dwelling units. But in fact, clarification was provided and is very clearly stipulated now in the staff report and the materials. It is 11 dwelling units. So if they want to do 11 detached single-family, fine. If they want to do 4 duplex units to give them 8, then they could do 3 more single-family. So there's a total of 11 dwelling units at this time. The combination of how those will be developed is up to them. But it's 11 dwelling units total. So this is the proposal for 11.
So, I'm sorry, so in other words, a duplex is 2 dwelling units?
Correct. And their total is 411.
Right.
Thank you. This is a plat, not a plat, but a site plan of the subject property. You can see some of the important design elements here are that we have the ingress egress to the 2 properties on the north and the south does in fact come with the ingress egress for the 6 units that's there right now. I'll come back to that topic in a moment. You can see there is a 10-foot undisturbed buffer all the way around the subject property. That's a noteworthy design element because this is in our Hamlet's character district. You can see that the ingress comes in, goes up here, and then circles around. These areas here have passed fire truck radius, and we'll have to go through site plan review to get fire truck circulation. The quality of this road right here came up at the planning board. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. I think I actually have slides that deal with this, but that is the proposal. Let's see if I can get this to work. Come on. You know, there's a reason you use a remote. Wah. There we go. So as part of any conditional zoning district, the applicant can volunteer conditions to deal with certain issues. They have done that. The staff report originally had 21 conditions. Through the process of working with staff as well as going to the planning board and addressing some of planning board's concerns, the applicant have now proposed 25 conditions. The staff report has a number of issues from staff, and there are 3 conditions that have some language to be modified. The applicants, I was on the phone with them as recently as before this meeting. The applicants, we've worked all of those issues out. They came up at planning board. They have conditions. They'll address that. But these are some of the things that the proposed conditions address. Thank you so much. Next. As far as with all rezonings, council is aware that you need to look at consistency with the comprehensive plan. This area right here, next Beth, is part of the area called an area to enhance. And next Beth, on the general framework map, next Beth, it's also referred to as a neighborhood character. New neighborhoods should provide different home types on different lot sizes that vary enough to provide a range of home choices in the same neighborhood, including open space. One of the very interesting elements of this project, looking at it as staff, is that when you look at a diversity of housing options, a diversity of densities, and you look at the character of this area, if the 6 units that are there right now didn't exist, let's say this was just, quarter to third of an acre detached single-family residential lots, that would be the prevailing character here. But the fact these already were approved and already began developing like this, staff can't say, oh, that's out of character with the neighborhood, what you're proposing, because it's right there. I mean, it's been approved for quite some time, it just was never developed. If it had been approved and nothing had ever been developed, it may be a different story, but we have to look closely at what the prevailing character is for this area and the fact that the comp plan does call for that diversity of housing options as part of an area to enhance as well as a neighborhood. A diversity of densities, a diversity of housing sizes, et cetera, enhances a neighborhood, at least according to the comprehensive plan. Next, Beth, please. Thank you. The character districts map designate this as a hamlets area. Next, Beth. And the definition of hamlets is to represent specific neighborhoods in Southern Pines that reinforce feelings of living in a forest. Narrow streets, large front yard setbacks with dense tree plantings, forested lots, and low-profile homes. The applicant came in with conditions to achieve this. For example, the buffer that will be retained around the outer edge of the property will provide trees that will remain. The applicants have proposed, instead of coming in and meeting the town standard for a big old wide roadway that would be out of character with this area and the existing development, they came in, they found the 1980 cross-section, and as part of the conditional zoning district process, they requested to use that 1980 cross-section, which we're fine with, and that will go through site plan review to make sure that garbage trucks, fire trucks, things like that can still use that cross-section because it's narrower, but it's not unacceptably narrower, you might say. It's more consistent with the Hamlets character district. Do you have a question?
I was going to ask with the cross-section, when you talk about cross-section, is it an access road?
No, the cross-section, and if I may be misunderstanding you, so bear with me if I am. The cross-section of the road normally would, you have, it's the width of the road. Basically, the width of the road might be, 26 feet, 24 feet, something like that. The width of this road, I think, is 20 feet. Am I? 20 to 24 foot, and that's narrower than the standard road. And it also doesn't have a lot of the municipal cross-section things on the outside of it, like sidewalks and streetlights and things like that, because the existing cross-section within the development doesn't have that. And if you take an old development that doesn't have something like that, and you add it in a subsequent phase, it can be very odd and very jarring, and you're better off just trying to maintain the consistency.
So the original 6 houses have roads that are between 20 and 24 feet wide, correct?
I believe so, yes, but you may want to double-check that with the applicant, yep.
The size of the contiguous lots, the 6 lots, do you know the acreage of those?
Well, they're townhome lots, so what you actually have is, great question, I understand. Here's a good, the portion of land that these homeowners own is the footprint of their building, and then they own 1/6 common, or at least that's the typical arrangement, a 1/6 fractional ownership of the balance of the common area.
Okay, so we don't know lot size. I mean, I understand that you're saying there's a,
Building footprint would be lot size, so the lot, if these are 2-story, I'm just going to speculate in the ballpark of 1,000 feet for those lots? 1,000 square feet?
Yes, 1,500, because the majority of the square footage is on the ground floor.
Okay, thank you.
What's the acreage of that space that the
Right.
6 houses are on?
That I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Ask the applicant, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're good. No, we're good right here. Now, moving forward, there's just a few things I want to talk about. One of the design elements of good character is building precedents or design elements that are consistent with the surrounding character of the community. That's been a bit of a discussion topic because when the applicants first came in, the commitment for the condition was we will build homes that are consistent with the character of the community. At planning board, it came up, a bunch of neighbors came and they said, listen, the character of homes in this area kind of is all, there's a lot of different home styles in this area. The applicant spoke to that. Ultimately, it's been determined, and the planning staff is comfortable with the fact that we have a condition that, let me back up. The applicants originally were they submitted some styles of some homes at the planning board meeting, but there was some pushback to the style of homes. The style of homes were very modern. The applicant felt they looked good. The neighbors weren't so sure. So what has come out since that time, since the planning board meeting, is that in fact, the new homes within these 2 areas are in fact subject to the architectural review that is the CC&Rs for this entire neighborhood. So these folks will have involvement in the approval of the architecture for these homes as part of the CC&Rs. So staff said, great, we can't necessarily do better with fitting the character of the neighborhood than an architectural review board of the 6 homes that are already there and the HOA. So we inserted language into the condition that I can read to you and ran it by the applicant, which was simply that the homes will be consistent with the character of the neighborhood as reviewed by the HOA. And we leave it at that. So that we're comfortable with that, but that can certainly be a topic of discussion. Next, please, Beth. Thank you. I pointed out already the 1980 road standards. These roads will be built to that cross-section, and that is shown on a copy of the site plan that is included with the document. It is included with the conditions, is linked in the conditions of approval.
so let me back up. I'm sorry. Let me back up to the HOA and the fact that current residents would have some input into what was happening. The current residents you have a vote per resident, is that right? As far as the HOA goes, so you would have 6 votes?
I don't know the answer to that. I understand the question. It's a great question. I would ask the applicant and any members of the public who are here representing the
Right.
HOA to get some
So if
clarity
we're
on that.
setting everybody up for a 6-11 vote, we might as well not be setting up that condition.
Yeah, that could be a challenge.
Right.
That's
Okay.
an understandable challenge if in fact they have total declarant rights or some detail like that as a topic of concern. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've already mentioned the fire truck turning radius. That's obviously something that we're going to have to look at site plan. The fire marshal is very eager and for fire code reasons to make sure that a fire truck can get in there and turn around. The quality of the road that exists right now, there were comments that came out at the planning board meeting that garbage trucks have a hard time getting in there, that the asphalt is not very thick, that there are challenges with that. So the applicant did commit to a condition that did agree to a condition that is in the packet, that any roads used for access to these portions would be tested and would be built to the necessary standard to support the 75,000-pound fire truck. And so that's the standard Southern Pines uses. Not roads that are not needed for access. So in other words, there was an early version of the condition where, like all roads within Hunt Clough had to meet the standards. And staff didn't think that was fair, that they maybe have to rebuild a road that is not even being used as a result of their development. So it would just be this portion coming in, this portion coming over here, and this portion coming down here. And these are two different phases. I'll show the phasing plan in a second here. But so this portion of the road and this portion of the road may need to be improved to meet the standards of the town at site plan review. Next, Beth.
Thank you. So it seems like to me, every road that would be an access road for a fire truck to get to any house within the development would be relevant. Am I missing
Yeah,
something
except
there?
in terms of the concept of an exaction on a new developer, you really need to be careful about rational nexus and rough proportionality. Rough proportionality is going to be, is the development of these homes and these homes creating an impact on this road right here? Not really, because is the development of these homes and these homes creating an impact on this road right here? Yeah, because you have to come in here to get up here. You have to come in here to come down here. Is the development of these homes creating impact right there? Yes, but right there, is the development of these homes creating an impact right here? No. And so requiring the developer of these two areas to rebuild this, if you were to say everything, just isn't roughly proportional, and there isn't a rational nexus back to the criteria for review that he or she would need to improve that as well. Only that which they're impacting.
Okay.
Okay, the access. It did come up early in this project about if this is a separate parcel and this property line runs like this, then this project is being accessed across another parcel to get into their parcel. And typically, when you're dealing with development, if I have to come across your land to get to the land next to you that I'm developing, I need an agreement from you, and we typically look for that in the application review process. In this case, what we received was from the applicant. We received a letter from their attorney who did an analysis of the documents that exist for this, and in that letter that's in the file and in the packet, their attorney does believe that, based on the language in the CC&Rs, that the owners of this parcel and the owners of this parcel have a perpetual easement to use this property to get to this parcel. So I believe the applicant's attorney is here this evening, and so if you have questions about that issue, that really, in terms of access easements, just like property line disputes, that's kind of a civil matter. Staff try really hard not to wade too far into those, except for trying to square stuff away and make sure that, I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So that would be something you may want to ask the applicant and the applicant's attorney later this evening. One more, please. This was an agency comment we received from NCDOT. Another issue that came up at Planning Board was about traffic. This is up to 11 units, which basically generates 110 trips total, average daily trips. AM peak and PM peak don't really even trigger a traffic design analysis. It falls below that threshold, and that's the threshold below a TIA. So 11 units really just don't trigger anything coming and going. NCDOT did, however, say that no turn lanes are warranted, sight distances may need to be improved. Prior to modifying any driveway, any ingress egress to an NCDOT facility, you do need to stop by and get your driveway permit, the equivalent of a driveway permit, modified for the numbers, and that's when they might look at sight distances and things like that. But the numbers just don't trigger. There are differences of opinion on that. It did come up at Planning Board. People obviously will share that with you this evening. But in terms of the numbers under the UDO, the numbers just didn't trigger any kind of review.
Director Grieve, so if sight distances did need to be improved, at what point does NCDOT determine that?
Prior to approval or sign off on that permit that they need to do. Yeah, they'll go in there.
So they'll come back out and actually look at it? Okay.
Yep.
Director Grieve, I just had a question about, I think you mentioned the asphalt not quite being as sturdy. When would that be worked out?
Yeah, great question. So both of these developments would need to go through site plan review. They are being reviewed as multifamily. They're not being reviewed right now as townhomes, so they wouldn't go through subdivision review. They would go through site plan review. And site plan review, we would see the site plan, and that's when we would really, the reason staff have a pretty high comfort level with not every single engineering detail being worked out is because we do that process where they come in with their site plan, they show existing conditions, they show where they're gonna demo, where they're gonna have to saw cut and remove everything, where they're gonna have to put new fill in. They're gonna show the stormwater, they have to meet state and local stormwater management standards. So we know that when this all is being developed in terms of grading, in terms of access, in terms of sewer and water infrastructure, we know we're gonna see a big old thick set of plans with numbers and data, and we're gonna have staff pouring all over those for an extended period of time. That's kind of something that happens behind the scenes, and so a lot of times audiences and members of council aren't aware that's going to happen. So it's like, well, man, if this is it, and we're going to approve this, and tomorrow they're going to start building a house, we better get all these details squared away. And we're thinking, no, we got to go through the whole site plan process. And so that's that process that will make sure that they may have to do core samples to look at geotechnical issues in the sub base of the road to see whether or not it needs to be improved before they can repave it, things like that. So, yeah.
So the planning department is not taking a stand on whether there exists or does not exist a perpetual easement. And the only person who has asserted that is the attorney for the applicant.
I would say staff's position is that based on our review of the applicant's materials is that it is more likely than not that they have the right to use that. And I would urge you to ask more questions. To get to a higher confidence level for you guys, for the council, you can certainly ask their attorney to go into more detail on that. But if it was less likely than not to be the case, we have a pretty good meter for things, so we try to look at it and we say, this appears to be, but this does appear to be that they have the right to use that and if they don't get it squared away, that civil matter will hold up development in the future, so our level of concern that something may happen is relatively low. Something unintended may happen is relatively low.
We're not the deciding body as to that easement or non-easement.
My experience with this is that the existence of an easement and the ability to use that is in fact a civil matter between two private parties. And so if you have an attorney alleging that it can be used and that information that we have, we believe, we do look at it. In other words, I never like to give the impression that staff is like, oh, well, we're not going to wade in on that. We have to wade in on stuff all the time. We have to have a little bit of expertise and a lot of stuff. We did look at the letter, we did look at the attached materials, and we look at it, we say, we believe it to be more likely than not to be true that they have the right to use that easement. So we're okay with proceeding with a condition that matter be, that access be legal and be able to be used. So.
But that condition's in there. We're not the gatekeeper for whether it's legal or not legal. And if they go through all this stuff and it's determined in a civil case that it's not, then this is all a moot. Okay.
Yep. And if it's litigated and it turns out that it's not, that condition would stop the whole development from happening. This is a great topic of conversation. You can imagine there's a lot of issues that come up like this. A development comes in and there's a disagreement over where a boundary line is. And we don't stop everything and allow that to be litigated and get in the middle of that, at great expense. There's just certain things we have to say, like we have to use that sort of judgment of, is this more likely than not, and to be true one way or the other. Yeah. So, thank you.
Councilman Goodman, did you have a question?
Nope.
Okay, your mic's on, just want to make sure.
One of the last things is that the applicant did speak at the planning board and indicated that there would be phasing, and we mentioned we don't have a phasing plan, and according to the UDO, if there's going to be phasing, a phasing plan needs to be approved by the town. This was the phasing plan. I did receive this earlier today. It's a simple phasing plan, so I'm okay with the fact that it came in earlier today. And the way this looks, obviously, is that phase one is these south lots. Phase one does include, I'm stealing a little bit of Jeremy's thunder here because I think the phasing plan is part of his presentation. He sent it to me and I said, this is part of your presentation, isn't it? He says, yeah. So you can see that as part of phase one, they are going to have to deal with the ingress egress to phase one. It comes down here, so the road will be part of that. This green boundary is what we will see then on that site plan, and we'll start pouring over with all the details and all the grades and all the size of the pipes and the depths of the pipes and the slope of the pipes and everything like that. And then phase 2 is up here, so. The UDO does not prevent, does not prohibit non-sequential proceedings, so phase 1 can become phase 2 or vice versa. The only thing the UDO requires is that phases have to function alone in case, for example, monetary policy goes haywire and a project stops and doesn't happen for 35 years. 45 years, excuse me.
We often see phasing plans with timing tied to them. Are you comfortable with this one not having that, or maybe that's what Jeremy's going to talk to us about?
I am comfortable with that, and boy, have we ever had bad luck with assigning timeframes to phasing plans. Almost inevitably, they just don't work and they become non-sequential. So we try to have our primary focus on phasing being, can these phases function alone if subsequent phases don't wind up? You just don't want to have a phase 1 that can function great today, but needs the capacity that's going to come along in phase 3, and then bankruptcy occurs or a recession happens, and you know, we've all lived through that, and we can play that tape forward and backward all day long.
So phase 1 and phase 2, where they overlap, that dovetail area, is that subject to, both of those are subject to the easement? That is the easement, right?
That is the area that you can see that this phase needs this to get to it.
Right.
This phase needs this to get to it. And that's why I asked them to overlap in those two areas, because either phase that comes first will have to deal with that area.
So if the easement is found to not be a perpetual easement, that would,
Shut her down.
okay.
If it turns out they don't have the right to use that as access for development of those two parcels, then yes, that would shut that down. I think that's it. Anything after that? That is all. Planning staff, again, is recommending approval. The planning board did recommend approval, subject to 2 additional conditions, which are already in the 25 now. There were a handful of issues that planning staff had outlined in the staff report. However, the applicant has addressed those, and we do have 25 conditions that are. Yeah, there was a discussion about clarifying what the architecture of the homes is going to be, show us some renderings. However, when the applicant said instead, in order to have flexibility to meet what the HOA has in mind, they would prefer to just run it by the HOA and get that approval, and it says that that's required in the documents, we thought, yeah, that's better than us saying, no, show us what you're going to do, and then somehow we approve the architecture of the residential structures.
And there's no stipulation as, sorry. There's no stipulation as to how the voting would occur in that case. That's going to be a question for HOA and the CC&R as far as architectural review goes. So we don't know whether there is a stipulation that allows a voice to be heard as to the voice of the original 6 residents,
Yeah,
or if they are automatically a minority party and would have no standing.
in my opinion, that's a great question to get clarity on,
You're
because
right.
that can actually cut 2 ways. For example, if the undeveloped properties, because it's one property, only gets 1 vote each.
right.
And so the developer, in this case, going into it, has 2 votes and the applicants have 6, they could hold him and say, just keep
Accountable,
denying
right.
every design. And the opposite is true as well, a scenario where maybe based on the numbering of the, yeah, so that's definitely something that, to increase council's comfort, you may wish to get further clarity on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
A couple questions, might not be for you or for them, but just let me know. First one's really procedural. Maybe Attorney Clodfelder will help me. You said that at the 2011 or whatever it was, there was an approved rezoning that had dedication to the town. You used the word dedication quite a bit, but truly it was more of a proposed dedication, because since it never happened, clearly that wasn't dedicated. So they're not tied to that allocation of dedicated to the park.
Correct. Dedication means both offer and acceptance. We
Okay.
have potential offer, but no actual development, so you couldn't have.
Okay, thank you. Second question I had was, you mentioned the 10-foot undisturbed buffer, which is fantastic, thank you. Is that the undisturbed and planted? Because I know some undisturbed buffer doesn't have a lot in it. So does it need to adhere to some planted standards if that 10 feet doesn't have much in it?
My understanding right now is that it is labeled as undisturbed, so you just wouldn't touch it. And if there's not much in it, that would be a thin, so you may wish to ask further a clarifying question on that.
Okay.
That it could be that that is addressed in detail in the application, and it's just not reflected in the staff report. So it's a great question. I appreciate you bringing that up.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Director Grieve, you went through a little bit of a history with this property. The most recent approved zoning has it zoned for how many units? Total, I guess, would be
my
with the
goodness.
6 existing plus those 2.
I think it's, the numbers coming to my mind is 8. I had this conversation with Ryan probably a long time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay, so
Yeah.
8 plus the 6.
Yeah, so
So
just
8.
some interesting history as well is that, when the applicant first came to our office and said, hey, we've got this property, keep in mind that these actually are 2 different zonings. This is a conditional zoning district, and this is just zoned like the rest of the neighborhood. So the proposal is actually to take 2 different zonings and to combine this into one zoning district, which is a conditional zoning district. When the applicants came in and said, well, what can I do with this? Well, you can do this. Exactly this. And this also requires that you dedicate that. That's what the approved conditional zoning district is. So the zoning of this property requires that to occur. And if you don't want to do that, you need to do something else and rezone the subject parcel, and that's what this process is here.
So my eyes are terrible. Is it 1.2 acres, the top portion of it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that 1.2 acres
Hey, well,
technically.
if I may, we could do the math here. We got 1.2 acres up here. We got 2.89 down here. 3.89. That can't be right. No, because it's 4.13 total, and that leaves this is like a tenth of an acre. So that's
No,
probably,
we'll ask.
that's
That's
awful.
all right. So as it stands today, the 1.2 acres is zoned, the northern portion of this zone to be nothing.
It's RS2. Yeah, it's not part of the conditional zoning district under the zoning map.
Okay, so RS2 means how many units per acre on that part of it would be allowed?
RS2 actually has 20,000 square foot minimum lot size, so 2 units per acre, default. By right.
And what was the acreage?
1.2.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you get 2 units on that parcel.
Okay.
So in other words, that would be a two unit if you left you're calling it the northern
I don't know if it's
plot,
northern
but
or not, but yeah.
the top of the map, as
Thank
the
you.
way we're looking at the map right now, that 1.2, if we went with the zoning as it exists on that, that would be limited to 2
2 units.
units.
And
That
you
would
would run
be
into some,
subject to an easement that may or may not be valid.
what you would run into is that direct access onto Indiana would be extraordinarily challenging.
Yeah.
The driveway access directly onto Indiana.
Right.
Number 1, because of topography, and number 2, because of that direct driveway access, it would have to come through as a major subdivision to put 2
Okay.
lots here.
Okay. And Indiana is such a freeway to the base anymore that, the traffic on Indiana is fairly daunting. Certainly very different than it was in, where'd you start this story? 1963.
Where it started.
Yeah, that's when.
Really kicked up in 1981.
Yeah.
2001.
Okay, well, we were all still in horse and buggy then, so I got it. Okay.
Okay, so by doing the conditional zoning,
They get a lot,
District.
Yeah.
will they get, so 8 new is allowed anyway. 2 would be allowed in the RS2 area, and they're putting in, which would be a total of 10, and they're asking to put in 11. Okay, just making sure my math is right. Thank you.
And the size of the lots. And the size of the lots that are already approved for the 8 is irrelevant at this point because that's approved.
Well, once again, the size of the lots, it's the townhome. it's the
Townhome
range.
itself, I got it, okay,
Building and.
I got it.
Arrangement in that regard, and
Okay.
they would have to plat those. So if they move forward with the conditional zoning district and they were doing a townhome product, they would still have to go through subdivision to plat those because we don't have a valid preliminary plat on those. That was another scenario that was discussed. So-
Okay, thank you.
BJ, do you recall from the file, the 2011 approval, was that for single-family homes, or were there some duplexes in there?
I believe
There's
those
been a
were-
number of conversations around this property over the years, so,
I think those were so were some single-family attached.
It was called townhomes in the
Okay.
minutes.
Those were single-family attached products. I don't know, maybe they're attached by a breezeway. They look like they might be detached there, but maybe they're connected in some way.
Okay.
These are connected.
8 new homes.
But yeah, this,
They're not attached.
Back to that number of units conversation that you started all of this with, because I know there's been different things looked at over the years, and I just don't recall the details of this 2011 approval.
Okay.
yeah, I think the density of the proposed development was 2.57 dwelling units per acre. I think when you take 11 and you have 4.13 acres, I think it was 2.57.
Does anyone else have questions for staff?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Director
Thank you.
Breeve. Yep. Rather than having the applicant come up, I think that we're going to have questions for the applicant based on public input. So I would like to go ahead and ask that anyone from the public who would like to speak.
But the applicant will speak after that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Unless
that's-
you'd rather me turn around and do both.
No, I think it's great. I think we hear from, and then the applicant can address issues. I agree with that. I thought you kind of sound like, rather than hearing from the applicant, we're going to hear from the neighbors.
Well, I do want to hear from the applicant, but I think we're going to have questions for the applicant and not questions for the neighbors. Okay. So if anyone from the public would like to speak, I'll just let you guys civilly take turns coming up and speaking. If you'll just introduce yourself and give us your address before you speak.
My name is Shannon Smith, 1624 East Indiana Avenue, number 14. I serve as president of the HOA of the Association. My comments on this would be, I think we're dealing with a misnomer, first of all, with the property itself. I believe that we're looking at this as being, the entire thing being Hunt Cliff, Inc., and that our properties were the 6 that are currently there. Our properties have been donated, or not donated, but deeded to us. And this was back in 1980.
It is on.
This was back in 1982.
Hey, Shannon, will you just
So
pull
it
the
is-
microphone closer to your face? No, I just want to make sure that we can all hear you.
Okay. So in 1982, we were able to locate a warranty deed where the properties were deeded to Hunt Cliff HOA from Hunt Cliff, Inc. So which makes that property, should make that private, where our 6 homes currently are.
Okay.
Now, we have seen the ingress and egress that's following with the properties, but we don't believe that it should be subject to the entire cul-de-sac. Just being able to enter from East Indiana and then turning directly onto the properties that are needing or wanting to be developed at this time. And then to clarify, the property that the Hunt Cliff HOA currently owns is 1.59 acres.
And that's 6 units on 1.59, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's the HOA property, that would be, 1.59 would be the subject property minus the footprints of the buildings that are owned privately, correct?
I can enter this.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying, because in other words, if I have townhome footprints that are, let's say, 1,500 square feet. So the HOA owns the entire area, the individual landowners do not own the land beneath the structure that they own? So if I own Unit 14, do I own the land beneath that? Or does, because when you say that it's all of Hunt Cliff, that would include the postage stamp of the building footprint?
That should include that, yes, according to the exhibit.
I mean, based on that picture, I think it's got to. Okay.
We also had concerns about traffic, which I understand that the DOT has reviewed that, but the amount of traffic that's currently on East Indiana, it's taking us an exorbitant amount of time right now to be able to enter onto East Indiana, whichever direction you happen to be going in. So we do have major concerns about that. And typically, in the past, anyone who has been interested in developing the property had come to us prior to. And I did just recently speak with Ryan Tuesday of last week. He did reach out to me, so we had a conversation then. But that was the first time that we had had any contact from the developer or having this developed. We are concerned about the topography, which we also have approval rights on, as well as the aesthetics for the buildings or the homes. Soil erosion has been another issue that we are greatly concerned about. And we would also be concerned about phasing that would be taking place on the property.
Do you have specific concerns about the Phase 1 and Phase 2 that's been outlined?
Our concern, I think, in general, is going to be the Phase 2, because the property is kind of rolling down and toward ours, and we have had some erosion in the past from that, so we are concerned about the trees, tree removal, and then further erosion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the exhibit.
Ms. Smith, is that paperwork that you,
This came from Moore County Register of Deeds.
thank you.
Just as a detailed follow-up, what is currently owned by Hunt Cliff Inc. is 1.29 acres, and then each individual footprint owned by McCain, Myers, McKinstry, Vasquez, Smith, and Liverman is 0.04 acres, totaling 0.24. So those two numbers combined get to the 1.59 that was just stated.
Give me the second number, the one owned by the individuals.
Yeah, according to county tax records, the calculated acres of the building footprints are all 0.04 of an acre.
Okay, so 0.04 times 6.
6 times.
4 times
6 times, yeah.
Thank you.
24. Yeah, I got
And
it.
then the common area is 1.29, so if you add 1.29 and a quarter of an acre, you get up in the hundredths of a ballpark of the 1.59 number that was just given.
Great. Thank you for checking on that.
I want to be clear what we're being asked to gatekeep and decide on. The titles, and I know it's entered into an exhibit, title's very pertinent to this project and whether they're going to move forward or not, but we're not being expected to interpret title and the right-of-ways for what's Hunt Cliff, what might be this property, correct? Okay.
Hello, Meredith Mucci. I live at 103 Canterbury Road, just down the street. And I actually love buildings and all that stuff. I'm in real estate, so I don't have a problem with development at all. However, I actually was really glad that they brought, I have copies of those minutes from 1982 or whatever, where they rezoned the property. And currently, I don't know if you guys want to see these, because you asked about it, but I have 5 of them. It's actually should never have been rezoned R1 conditional use, because the original application for it was done by Warren Dabbs when he was looking into buying it, because it was in foreclosure by McDonald Brothers. And so it was rezoned only, it was only going to be rezoned from R2 to R1 if that property was donated to the town or given to the town. And since the sale never went through, the property was never donated, it never actually should have been rezoned per his application from R2. So I don't even know why it's been designated as a R1 conditional use to begin with, or, yeah.
So your stance is that
It should still be R2, all of it.
that it was a condition of the modification of zoning in the 1980s?
Yeah, in the 1980s, it's right here in the meeting minutes that it was a condition of the rezoning was for that property to
And the
be.
condition was not met?
Correct. So,
Condition was that it had to go back to the town before it could be rezoned. Am I understanding what you're saying?
so the condition of them approving his rezoning application from R2 to from RS2 to RS1 CD was that he donate that one parcel to the town.
Are you talking about 1982 or the 2011 application?
Oh, sorry, 2011. I'm sorry, not
Thank you. I think
1982.
that's where the
My gosh.
confusion was.
I'm sorry, 80s, 2011, yeah, sorry, that was in 2011. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, so in 2011, when it was rezoned from RS2 to RS1 CD, that's when they did rezone it in 2011, and it was a condition. So it never should have been rezoned. So it should all still be rezoned, it should all be zoned RS2 currently. Does that make sense? Sorry.
So your stance is that the 2011 rezoning never occurred because the contingency was never met?
Correct.
Okay.
So first, I mean, not that that really necessarily makes any difference now, but because they're wanting to rezone it all anyway. But that was just kind of my first point of it, because they're applying to it as if we're only just going from, that it already has a conditional use on it and that it is already RS1, which it is, should not be, since it should never have been rezoned originally, because the condition was not met that was set forth back in 2011.
We'll have staff speak to that, because that's a good question for what happened.
Secondly, they're speaking about these two parcels as if they are just two parcels. However, part of that parcel on, I guess, the south, I don't know, the one that's green on the screen that's got the trees on it that you can see, part of that parcel is not actually part of Huncliffe. It is still part of Sandhurst, which is my neighborhood, which is a different neighborhood technically, and has different deed restrictions on it as well. It's really weird the way that it was divided and the way that it was zoned and all these things. So that's something that hasn't really been mentioned, and has other.
So the dark green portion of the property is both Huntcliffe and Sandhurst?
Sandhurst, yeah. It's a very weird situation. I understand that, but I don't know. So all of those things, just before I even started, I did prepare stuff to say, but then a lot of it's kind of been addressed. And I did look through the 2040 plan, because I think that's really what you guys look to. And I know back in 1982, I'm going to go back to 1982 now officially, when this was originally approved, we didn't have the 2040 plan. And so they may have approved that back then. They thought all sorts of things were good in 1982. I mean, I think people smoked on airplanes in 1982. Not a good idea. So yes, so going to the 2040 plan, they did refer to this as a new neighborhood. It's not a new neighborhood. So I know that this is a, it's not a new neighborhood. It's an established area, and it's an area to enhance, and it's clearly outlined as an area to enhance, which is meant that it is for small to medium improvements to keep things stable and fresh, like not meant for big redevelopments, just thoughtful upgrades, improve the quality of life for the people that already live there. Clear cutting trees, squeezing in the maximum number of homes is kind of the complete opposite of what the 2040 plan is recommending, in my opinion, right? As something that is designed as a hamlet is supposed to feel like living in a forest with narrow streets, big front yards, setbacks, dense trees, low profile homes. And it's what makes those neighborhoods special, right? Huncliffe is really, really cute. What they're proposing just really does not even make sense. I mean, it looks nice on this little piece of paper maybe, but you can't fit and squeeze that many homes onto 4 acres. It's not going to be 4 acres. Once you take away, you say 4 acres, but once you take out room for roads and the retaining pond and the setbacks, that's a lot of homes to squeeze into. It's not 4 acres. So really those things, I'm not going to go into detail. They didn't even address the potential watershed issues, because it is in a watershed, a fresh watershed I was reading about. That's actually something that was in their application. But I don't even think we really need to go into that, because I don't think it is alignment with the 2040 plan, because it is in a hamlet and it is in an area for just the comprehensive plan area to enhance, not to, and there's plenty of areas. I do think that we do need we definitely, I completely agree, we need housing, different types of housing in this area, for sure. But there's plenty of areas in that 2040 plan that already have those types of places set aside that we're going to develop and improve upon. So we need to focus on those areas and put these great houses and townhomes in those areas that are already set aside and planned for. That's it. Any
Thank you.
questions? Thanks. You guys want a copy of that, the notes from the meeting?
If you want to give them.
Please, if you.
I'll give them to
yeah.
them. Okay.
We may, but I think.
An identifier for the record.
It's not QJ.
Do you want us to excuse you now? Or wait, do you want to wait until the next speaker and then excuse you?
Madam Mayor, council members, developer, I appreciate you all being here and listening to me. I am not here to advocate to accept or deny the zoning change.
Can I have you give us
So
your
why am I here?
name and address real fast? I know we actually have your name from earlier.
Absolutely. My name is Marco, M-A-R-C-O, Roding, R-O-T-T-I-N-G. I live at 1605 East Indiana Avenue, which is directly across from where this development is going to go. I can appreciate that this gentleman has invested his money and would like a return on his investment. Getting back to why I'm here, at the planning meeting, I invited all of those folks to come to my house, sit on my front porch, have a nice cool glass of tea, and I'm inviting all of you to do the same before you make the decision. The reason why I'm here is traffic. The traffic on East Indiana is incredible. When I'm coming from town and driving home, does anybody know the speed limit there by chance? 35. Yep, there you go, 35. I drive 35 miles an hour. And during traffic times when I'm driving 35 miles an hour, I have a parade. I mean, it's incredible. If I speed up to 45 miles an hour, I have a parade. If I start driving 50, 55 miles an hour, I'm going the speed limit. And it's just incredible. 3-4 times a month on Indiana Avenue, you'll see the carcass of a dead deer that's gotten hit. Where they are going to build these homes, there's a small herd of deer that camp out there in the evening, and I realized that they would be gone. But when you look at 11 units, you're looking at 22 cars. And when you're looking at 22 cars, when my wife or I try to leave the driveway during traffic time, it takes us, without exaggeration, at least 10 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes to pull out safely. A little history, and this is before these 22 vehicles are coming in. In the last 18 months, one of our neighbors was already killed in a traffic accident within 100 yards of our house. The 85-year-old widow that lives across the street from us pulled out, didn't see somebody, totaled her car, their car. She won't drive anymore. We've had 2 traffic accidents within our property on the street, one of them coming onto our property, and we found pieces of the front end of a car. It was incredible. So what I'm getting at, I think it's premature to make any decision on a zone change without having a proper traffic plan in place. And that traffic plan needs to be enforced. The speed limit needs to be enforced. And obviously, greater minds than me would have to figure that out. But until we get a handle on the traffic, the quantity of traffic, the speed that traffic goes, I think it's premature to seriously look at the zoning change. And again, I appreciate that this gentleman wants a return on his investment, but can we slow down just a little? Can we get police enforcement? The police sit out in front of our house once a week or so, I always go knock on the window, hey, you guys get bored, come have some tea, come have some coffee. Can you, as the city council, please get a traffic plan in place before we add more traffic to the road? Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think I need a microphone.
Oh, we do. We've got you on YouTube, and if you're not on the microphone, then
Well,
they won't be able to
okay,
hear you
I can
either.
guarantee it'll echo. All right.
We can hear you just fine. though.
Okay, my name's Mark Mullen. I live at 230 Broadmead Drive. I'm in the southwest corner of the property that's to be developed. My wife and I moved out here out of Fayetteville when I retired from the service because we want to live in a small town instead of Fayetteville. And we had a lot of choices where we could go. We picked Southern Pines, all right? Nice small town. There wasn't any place I couldn't get to within 10 minutes of the 3 towns. Pinehurst, Aberdeen, I could get to Pinehurst Surgical in 10 minutes. Can't do it no more. That's because of the excessive development that's being done in the entire area, not just Southern Pines. So it's a general statement of overdevelopment. Part of overdevelopment across the road on Fort Bragg Road, where all those houses were just put in. Montrose on Fort Bragg Road. How many units are going into those apartment buildings that are on Morganton? 300 and plus, almost 400 additional apartment units going in there on Morganton. It's just a simple matter of overdevelopment. It's got to be step back a little bit. I think Marco was right. It needs to just be looked at and with a little bit more caution, a little bit more care before we start doing more development. Could you scroll through these until you get to that one picture of where it is just the development itself? There you go, okay? You know what that is? That's smoke and mirrors. Because all they show you is just that. They don't show you everything else that's around that area. Here's the GIS. This is what's around that area. Every single one. I'll give this in, I'll turn this over to you. I pulled this off from GIS. This is the square footage and the acreage of the surrounding lots and the houses that are there. Everything is in excess of half an acre or more. I'm even going to throw out the outliers because there's a 14-acre lot across the street. But every one of those lots, and now you're going to jam 11 more units into that small area. So then you're going to say, well, that's consistent. He says, well, that's consistent with the development of the area, within how everything else is around there. And it is not. I beg to differ and completely disagree that is as anything close to what's in the surrounding areas. I'll give you these here. You have those? Because there's no way that you can tell me that development there, because Hunt Cliff itself, the 6 units that were there are all grandfathered in. They were all built long. My house was built in '96. So almost all the houses that were built around the Hunt Cliff development were built well after that was done. Mr. Pate, you brought up the fact about the buffer. I know what my property has behind me. You know what there is? Nothing. A couple of scrub oaks, and a few other things. There is nothing there other than brush. And then some bigger pine trees as you go probably down the hill. Oh, by the way, there's a power line in there too. Do you know that? It goes along Indiana. Because that's that main trunk line that comes into Southern Pines. Let's see here. To me, this development would it would ruin the aesthetics of the entire neighborhood. It's nice. It looks nice. It looks pretty. I can do drawings all day long and make something look nice. But that doesn't make it look right. Now, the other one here is one that is always up for a bone of contention. What's the impact of the value of the properties around that area? They'll tell you in their writings, in all their development, there is no impact. Well, at the same time you say there's no impact, there's an impact. Because that's the way it is. Because you cannot say one thing and not have the other thing not true also. Because you don't know. Problem is, you won't know until it's too late. So I ask that you at least table this and take a step back and see what really is the result. Because Marco is right, the traffic is horrendous out there. And I don't have to go out there anymore. Every day is a Saturday for me. So it doesn't bother me as much. But it's a problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Merwin. I'd like to take this opportunity to just dismiss one of our council members who needs to be at another event this evening. If there will be a motion to allow Ms. Peterson to leave. A second?
Second.
All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Good luck. You can come up.
I'm Shannon Courtley, Courtleigh, 250 Broadmead. One of the previous speakers kind of almost stole my thunder, but I haven't heard anybody address the wildlife issue that's there. It's a parcel that has a lot of wildlife. I moved here 3 years ago, and right after I moved in, there was a deer that jumped across my fence and landed on my pool cover and fell through, shredded my liner, and drowned in my pool to the tune of over $20,000 worth of damage. Now, what's going to happen when we clear this area? There's a ton of deer that live back there. There's other stuff. There's snakes, there's frogs, there's lizards, there's rabbits, there's other things that I'm not even aware of. I just know that they live there. What are we going to do when we clear this area? Where are they going to go? What's going to happen? They're going to be in our yards. They're going to be in our streets. Think about Indiana Avenue as it is now. What's going to happen then? You think there's a deer problem now? Wait till they clear this area. You're going to see dead deer everywhere. The cops are going to get called out all the time. There's going to be accidents. There's going to be fatalities. It's going to happen. I've worked the emergency department for 25 years. I'm a physician assistant. I know what happens when deer and cars collide. It's never pretty, okay? And now I know what happens when a deer jumps your fence. It's expensive. And this is what I know. Another resident has a pool and they're scared too because the same thing's going to happen to them. And I have a child. I don't know what kind of snakes there are. Somebody could say, don't worry about it, but it doesn't matter. You step on a snake, it's going to come back at you. It's going to bite you. I don't want a snake biting me, and I have dogs in my backyard. I don't want this wildlife attacking my dogs, okay? But we need to see what's there. Has anybody studied the wildlife issue? Has anybody even given it a second thought? Seriously, again, table this, look at this, study this. Make sure we're not running into this like blind people without saying, hey, maybe we should think about it.
What was your name again?
Shannon Courtley.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Courtley. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Can I have someone, I had surgery like 3 weeks ago in my eyes. Can I have someone read what I wrote? My
yeah.
eyes are wonky and with nerves and stuff.
They'll just introduce themselves and then let us know that it's your words. I think that's fine.
Do you want me to stand up there and spell my name out for people?
No, he can do that. Thank you for letting us know.
So this is on behalf of Ms. Petticelli, Andrea Petticelli, 102 Canterbury Road. So I'm here today to voice my strong opposition to the proposed rezoning that would allow for 11-unit development in our established neighborhood. While we all recognize the need for responsible growth, this proposal threatens the very character, stability, and livability of our neighborhood. One of the main concerns shared by residents is the impact this rezoning will have on our home values. Our neighborhood was built with the perfect balance of space, privacy, safety, and stability. Allowing a dense, multi-unit development in an area designed for mainly single-family homes undermines the investment homeowners have made. Studies show that sudden zoning changes, especially those that introduce incompatible housing types, can lower property values. This is unfair to those who have worked hard to establish their homes here. Another concern many have is the traffic congestion, which is already an issue on our local roads. Increasing the number of housing units by such a significant margin for the neighborhood will add dozens of additional vehicles to our streets. This means more congestion, but more importantly, an increased risk to pedestrians, cyclists, and children who play in our neighborhood. Just in the last couple of years, there was a traffic fatality a few hundred feet from the entrance of Mr. Pascal's proposed development. Many of our streets were not designed to handle this level of traffic, and approving this development will make our roads less safe for everyone. On an average day, Canterbury Road sees approximately 100-plus cars speeding down the street, and that's just between the hours of 4 and 6 p.m. Not to mention the other times of the day. Increasing this traffic by adding additional homes on the corner will make it less safe than it's already become these last few years. Our neighborhood is home to a variety of wildlife, mature trees, and green spaces that contribute to the quality of life. The proposed development will require significant land clearing, which will destroy habitats and disrupt local ecosystems. Increased urbanization also leads to more pollution, noise, massive erosion, and stormwater runoff, which can negatively impact our environment, the neighboring homes, and reduce the natural beauty of our community. Rezoning this property and allowing all these units to be built is not just about this single development. It sets a dangerous precedent for future projects. If we allow one high-density development, what's stopping others from following? Once we open the door for rezoning, it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain the character of our area. Several members of the planning board kept making reference to the 2040 comprehensive plan at last month's meeting, which is being proposed here. What is being proposed here doesn't fall into the area to enhance guidelines that our neighborhood is classified under. In this comprehensive plan, it states changes to properties and neighborhood enhancement areas should be sensitive to the uses, densities, location, character, and views from the surrounding homes and neighborhood, none of which is this rezoning and proposal takes into account. I'm clearly confused on how adding 11 duplexes, townhomes, or 11 small homes fits in with a property directly across the street under contract for $1.4 million, or when the majority of homes are on well over half-acre lots. While I appreciate and understand that Mr. Pascal has the best intentions for his wallet, I stand here before you not against development or progress, but hoping for responsible, thoughtful planning that respects the existing neighborhood. There are better locations for high-density housing, such as areas already zoned for it or near existing infrastructure that can easily support it. We urge the council to protect the integrity of our neighborhood by denying this rezoning request and to preserve the quality of life in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public? Okay, seeing none. You'll have questions for staff before the applicant come up?
I have questions, but maybe I'll just wait again, let them.
The condition.
On the approval from the 2011? I would like to hear from staff at some point.
I would simply offer on that, and I'll certainly defer to BJ or Catherine. The 2011, it wasn't a condition for rezoning, it was a condition of the rezoning. So you heard BJ talk about that it was a condition had it moved forward to development that donation take place. But it never actually moved forward to site plan and ultimate development. And it's a small semantical issue, but it's a key distinction because the council didn't say, we will not rezone until you give us the land. They said, here is your rezoning. If it moves forward to development, there is an expectation of a donation. And it is kind of a key difference if you see how that plays out. And the other important aspect of that is that this is an application for rezoning. So whether, if the argument that it never actually went to RS1, even if that holds, it's still before you that you're being asked to rezone it with a conditional zoning district. And please jump in, correct, expand, or otherwise clarify what I just tried to explain. But it's an understandable, in reading a set of minutes, it's an understandable thing, but there is a difference in do this and get your rezoning versus it's rezoned, and in order to move forward, this is a condition, so.
The only additional thing I'll add is, and this might have been the point of the public member. Really close. Really close. How about now? Yes. This might have been the point of the member of the public who spoke. If not, I'll bring it up. The potential place where this becomes relevant for you all is when you're deciding or comparing what could be built now, right, versus with the rezoning. And as we've discussed, let's say there had been no 2011 rezoning, you'd be under the 1983. It's slightly unclear because there's different zoning code, but let's assume that it was RS2, which would be two dwelling units per acre, which would be 8 units, versus the 10 under the 2011, if that were. So you're really a difference of 2 units if there hadn't been a rezoning.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. All right, Mr. Pascal or a representative.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Sparrow. I'm with Longitude Planning Group, a local planning firm here in Southern Pines, representing Ryan Pascal and 15 Pine Cones. BJ did a really good job earlier, so a lot of this is probably repetitive, what I have in my presentation, but we can kind of go through it, and then we'll touch on some of the conditions, not only that we presented at Planning Board, but also some of the stuff that came up, including here this evening. So we'll just kind of walk through slide by slide. That's okay. Well, just to touch on the project location again, I think most everybody knows where this is at. Again, just south of Bethesda Road, right along Indiana Avenue, bordered by Canterbury to the south. Here's just an enlargement against Sandhurst Park to the north. Keep going, BJ. BJ touched on this, the existing zoning, the RS2 versus the RS1CD to the south. And then again, just really quick with the previous approvals. So again, Hunt Cliff was originally approved in 1981 for a total of 20 units, 6 single units, and then 14 duplex units. And this was supposed to be built into 2 phases. The first phase was supposed to have 10 units, but only 6 of those were constructed at the time, which you see today. And then of course, phase 2 never came to fruition. At some point, it was subdivided into 3 total tracts, which you see today. And then again, back in 2011, the conditional permit was issued. And that was under the old zoning ordinance, which was under a structurally integrated subdivision for 8 single-family lots. As you can see here, the 2 parcels, the north tract, which is about 1.24 acres, plus the 2.89 acres to the south, equates to 4.13 acres. Again, we're looking for the rezoning of an RM2 district. This gives us the capability to keep it in similarity with the existing Hunt Cliff tract with condo-style development, which is where you subdivide out the unit themselves, and then everything outside of that would be common area, and then dedicated to an HOA. Again, a portion of this site is within the WS3 watershed, which has a maximum impervious of 24%, which is kind of the east corner of the property, which is where we have some stormwater, and you'll see it later on another map. But again, we're looking at a maximum of 11 total units, which is about 2.7 acres.
11 units, 2.7 acres, right?
Yes. Units per acre.
Thank you.
Sorry. And then these are kind of some of the conditions, some of the site data that we put together. So again, to be kind of in similarity with Hunt Cliff, we're looking to do single-family detached as well as duplex units. The reason for that too, not only to keep consistency with Hunt Cliff, but also be able to, once we start getting into the detailed design, looking at the grading and, pulling buildings together, doing tree save and stormwater, as well as location of utilities. Again, looking at the road standards, we do want to maintain kind of what's out there, the no curb and gutter, with a width of about 20 to 24 feet, which we've been working closely with staff in regards to fire access and turnarounds, making sure that we meet the town standards for that. And then again, these will still be private roads. In regards to site access, we'll still maintain the existing entrance there along Indiana Avenue. And then as mentioned earlier, we will maintain a 10-foot perimeter buffer, which will be undisturbed, except in areas where we do have to have stormwater. So there will be some grading that we'll have to encroach potentially in those areas, but that is allowed under the UDO, section 4.3.4. Oh, go back, BJ. We're looking to maintain a minimum of 35% open space for the overall tract, as well as providing trail connections to Sandhurst Park to the north. Of course, we will provide stormwater management that will meet the town requirements for impervious surface. With the current Hunt Cliff tract does have water and sewer, so there's no extension of utilities to the site. And then the grading, looking at the overall property, there is some severe terrain there to the southeast. You can see on that corner, going back to the watershed, that orange dashed line there is the limit of the watershed. So everything to the east of that is the watershed, and everything to the left is outside of the watershed. So we're not proposing anything within that other than the stormwater management. But due to the terrain, we will be looking at doing some low walls potentially to save trees, and also looking at some of the units to have walkouts, which we'll touch on a little bit later. Again, going along the lines of meeting the town standards, we will have minimum two parking spaces per unit. We will have pedestrian connections from the parking areas to the individual units, as well as connecting back to Sandhurst Park. Any lighting that we propose in the parking areas will meet the town standards, as well as any new signage. The site plan, this is conceptual. We do have generic footprints is what you're looking at right now. We don't have definitive floor plans that we're looking at. That is something we talked about at planning board, looking to, one of the conditions you'll see tonight is limiting the square footage to 1,500 to 2,200 square foot, heated square foot. But the final layout will kind of deal with site plan once we get into grading, site utilities, and some of the tree save as well. The architectural character, again, be consistent with the surrounding character of the community, specifically within Hunt Cliff. Some of the units, like I mentioned, will have walkouts specifically there in the southeast corner due to the topography. Some of the materials that would be used would be hardy siding, horizontal or vertical, including asphalt, shingles, metal roofs, masonry accents, whether it's brick or stone, and composite decking. And then there in red goes back to what I mentioned earlier about what we discussed at planning board. So limiting the heated square footage to 1,500 to 2,200 heated square feet. Another thing we discussed at the planning board was limiting the height of the units. Again, going back to the low profile homes in this district, we had talked about 1.5 stories. So there wouldn't be a full 2-story home on these. This would be more of a single level home with maybe a bonus area above, looking at the parking area. So at the front elevation, it wouldn't be any higher than 1.5 stories.
Mr. Sparrow, what's the height of the existing 6 units that are in the middle of this? Do you know?
I do
height,
not, I
but
can't answer that.
Are they 1, 2 stories?
They're
Do you
1
know?
story.
Okay.
Yep. One thing we had discussed as well is a dumpster service area for the entire track. So this is required by the town based on the UDO in regards to the number of units we have. So that would be required. And then this would go back to kind of what BJ was touching on in regards to the roads, ensuring that those are sufficient to handle not only a garbage truck, but a 75,000-pound fire apparatus.
Do you have a proposed location? I'm so sorry.
I was going to ask where you anticipate putting it, but you might not know.
So we had talked about potentially down at the very southern edge. That way, that's because that's a good turning radius for the, not only the fire access, but for the garbage truck as well. But once we get into detailed design, we'll try and focus that more on the central area so people don't have that far to walk.
Because I know in the minutes from prior meetings, there was talk about the current 6 and their problems with the trash. Would they be able to use the dumpster as well? Even though technically, you're not going to be part of their HOA and vice versa?
Correct. That would be offered to the HOA, the other HOA.
Okay. So potentially, there would be no cans on Indiana if you allowed them to use that and you put that in?
That's correct.
That's one of the conditions that's in the staff report, the condition number 24, just that's addressed. Okay, thank you.
Relative to your self-imposed square footage requirement, we had talked earlier about how a dwelling unit, in the case of a duplex, that actually counts as 2 dwelling units. Is that for the single-family homes? But if you build a duplex in there, what are you looking at from a square footage standpoint?
That would be an individual unit.
That's an individual unit, so it could be.
So if the
twice that
duplex
if
was
it's a
together,
duplex.
yeah, it would be anywhere between 3,000 to 4,400 square foot.
Thank you.
This was just some of the architectural character that we presented at planning board. Kind of that A-frame structure, or story and a half structure. Again, we're not trying to create a large footprint on these, very small, trying to minimize the impacts to the grading and the existing trees. Go to the next one. And then this is kind of, again, this is still open for discussion. Again, we had talked about, again, more low-profile homes that mimic kind of what's out there now. But again, just small front porches, A-frame style home, again, kind of mimic the existing Hunt Cliff community.
I was still a little confused as the presentation. So what is your understanding of the way it's in the conditions as to this filter for who's going to make this determination, should this move forward, as to the architectural style and the type of home? I know we dug into it a little bit before, but it still was unclear to me. So how do you understand it? And I want to make sure that's in alignment with what you have interpreted, should that condition be part.
Yeah, and Mr. Pfeiffer's here as well, who may be able to speak to the HOA in regards to the architectural character. There's currently no architectural guidelines as part of the HOA, the current HOA, but they would have a vote in the final say on what these would be like. Now, I don't know how that would play out.
Because it's a second HOA. Like, I mean, it's not, you're not becoming a part of their HOA, right? It's that they have
Correct, but the existing
input.
HOA still has oversight, make sure I'm speaking correctly, but they have architectural oversight on these 2 tracks.
Okay. Okay. I know, I think it's the 6 units. Yeah, I think we'll let maybe Ms. Smith come back up. You don't need to now, but at some point to speak about the HOA, your all's position. Okay.
The president being here, perhaps she would be willing to speak to it as well.
Okay. Sorry, you can continue.
Oh, did you have a question, Mr. Gibb?
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
On that last slide, so that is a second set of architectural character along with the previous?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, a story and a half, front porches, gable roofs, again, to kind of mimic what's already out there.
Please.
We're in territory where we want to be careful, because under North Carolina General Statute, zoning regulations may not regulate the exterior of a residential structure, okay? That's why we don't have a residential structural code. Now, this is a conditional zoning district. Because it's a conditional zoning district, the applicant may come in and propose as a condition a certain style of architecture for residential homes, voluntarily offer that as a condition. If it displeases the town council and it's inconsistent with the character of the area, the town council can say, well, you know, so that's where the dialogue is, but the reason why staff is taking a bit of a cautious approach is because if they were to come in and say, let's say they were come in and say, here is the exterior rendering of the 3 different buildings we will build, just these 3 type, and that's it. You've seen that before with a couple projects. Okay, we'll put it in the packet and we'll say if this 3 is okay. We don't have that. We have a planning board concept. We have town council concept. And we're trying to strike a middle ground here between, we don't want to too aggressively say, ye shall do this with your residential architecture, because they're volunteering. Now, the consequence of not coming in with something that is adequately consistent with the character of the area and consistent with the comprehensive plan is possible denial. But it's also their voluntary condition. So that's why we're just being cautious. There's room to proceed here and get something knocked out. We're just being cautious, so, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. Again, BJ touched on this in regards to the phasing plan. We're looking to the southern track to be the phase 1. Again, looking to do 7 to 8 units in that section, and then finishing out the northern section at the end, phase 2. From the planning board meeting at the end, there were some additional concerns. I think they were brought up here tonight in regards to soil erosion and drainage. So BJ touched on this. So once we get to site plan review, doing engineering design, we got to abide by stormwater requirements, not only through the town, but through the state, and especially of erosion and sedimentation control. So that will be something that we'll have to do as part of our site plan process. Again, I touched on the service area and the access conditions in regards to the trash pickup. Again, we are offering, you know, to have the dumpster area that would be for the entire tract, not just for the new residents. Again, BJ touched on this too, the substandard entrance and easement area. Again, we'll be required to do a geotechnical study on the existing roads to make sure that it does meet fire apparatus for fire purposes to get to the 2 new tracks. Then again, we touched on the phasing plan, stormwater drainage, standing water, mosquitoes was brought up. We don't know what the final engineering design of the ponds are going to be. Again, that comes with the geotechnical report of the soils and the final water table. They could be dry retention, they could be wet retention. We just don't know at this level. Again, going back to traffic stacking concerns, left turn onto Indiana, working with staff and DOT, there unfortunately has not been any requirements for the development to do any traffic improvements on this section of the property.
Was that for the entirety, both phases?
For,
You said that there was no DOT recommendation for any changes. It's for all of it? If it's
Correct.
Okay.
based on the density that we're proposing, it doesn't hit a threshold for any traffic improvements along Indiana. And then again, touching on the architectural character that we showed a little bit ago, again, we'll just kind of have to work through those as well. And then, yeah, we'll take any questions you guys may have.
I don't have a question, but I know one of the comments from the public had to do with the wildlife in the area. And I just wanted to state this, and of course, I've got the rest of council, my town manager, as well as our planning director to straighten me out if I'm wrong. We take a look at wildlife whenever there's an endangered species that's in an area. And we need to worry about protecting, am I correct on that?
Answer coming.
Oh,
The UDO does not contain a requirement to administer the Endangered Species Act. That would not be appropriate. The Endangered Species Act is administered by the federal government. Now, what we do try to do is if something is going through an entitlement review that invokes a criteria such as, public health, safety, general welfare, things like that, then we look at an area, we may say, have you done an analysis of this area for woodpecker habitat, red-cockaded woodpecker habitat? Most applicants will not wish to risk that, so they will hire a consultant to do an assessment of RCW habitat. In terms of, in other jurisdictions, I'll say in other jurisdictions elsewhere in the country, just like you might do a traffic impact analysis, you might do an environmental assessment. And that's not a requirement under the UDO to do an environmental assessment and look at things like wildlife, flora, fauna, things like that on a site. So the only thing that's left then is the same criteria that would deal with public health, safety, and general welfare. If we are aware of a site that does have a particular habitat or a particularly special grove of specimen trees, longleaf specimen trees, we will note that and we will do what we can to protect it. But the tools in our toolbox for that protection are extraordinarily limited at both the state, at primarily the state level, to be honest. Yeah.
And just to note as well, we've already conducted a red-cockaded woodpecker study through Dr. J.H. Carter, so that has been.
yeah, I think the comment was relative to deer in that area and a large amount of deer. Now, I mean, we all see deer in our various neighborhoods, but if there's a large amount of deer in an area, I think that's something to take into consideration.
Mr. Pate, you have questions?
Heard it mentioned in one of the comments, would this require watershed allocation? I wasn't clear if it did or not.
No, the watershed on the, one of the maps shows it's down on the bottom, right here. This is the area that's within the watershed. And so there's nothing being developed within the watershed. So this area here is outside of the watershed.
Okay. Do you have anything else?
Yes.
Mr. Spare, can you speak to it was mentioned that a portion of this land is designated as Sandhurst as well as in Hunt Cliff?
Yeah, so we've taken that into consideration. If I can show you.
Sure.
It might be hard to see. I don't know if you guys can see. There's a line right here that goes across, which allows for one unit on that property. So we have taken that into consideration as part of the design.
So regardless of what you come up with, since this is conceptual, there will be no more than one unit past that line.
That's
which
correct.
I
Yes.
think is the one next to your property. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's basically, you guys keep referring to 4 point whatever acres. If you take that Sandhurst part out, you're looking at less than that. That's probably close to an acre that belongs to Sandhurst. So you're gonna cram another 10 units onto a smaller acreage. Plus, I'm pretty sure Sandhurst in the covenants and restrictions, we're not allowed to put dumpsters on the lot.
I think the question's not about if the property belongs in Sandhurst or Hunt Cliff, but more the zoning. And was the zoning beyond that hashed line part of the 1981 and 2011 zoning?
Yes, it was part of that entire tract.
Okay.
The RS1 CD district.
Okay.
The notes make it pretty clear that it was, I mean, I read through everything, and it was a compromise. We'll give you the rezoning if you do this.
I couldn't even see who was talking. Oh, my God. Okay.
So unfortunately, when we approve zoning, I don't think that we have the right to, maybe we do. I have never seen an instance that we have a right to say we're zoning it after it's been. Yeah, so if you're speaking in the back, besides the fact that we need to keep an orderly meeting, but if you are speaking in the back, yeah, raise your hand and come up to the microphone. Otherwise, anything on YouTube and anything recorded for the 2033 rezoning this property, they will not know what you said. When this doesn't happen, it falls through just like everything else has. Just saying. Okay. Mr. Pascal, I'm not saying it's going to fall through. I'm just saying this tract of land clearly has been through some time. Okay.
I honestly didn't follow any of the issue about the Sandhurst part. Like, what was the bearing of that on this application?
Well, so I guess this line,
Yes, I remember, I was
there's
showing.
only one unit.
But what bearing does that have on this
She
zone?
may be, and open to correction, but she may be referencing HOA or POA restrictions and covenants relative to Sandhurst and how that might affect this portion of the property, which would be then why Mr. Fowler has suggested they're only building one home on that
Right.
most southern section because it does fall apparently under the Sandhurst covenants and restrictions. Am I correct that? Yes. Thank you.
A question about we're not the gatekeeper for interpretation of easement, non-easement with Hunt Cliff. Are we intended to determine what is or is not applicable from Sandhurst property descriptions, or they're subject to if somebody makes a challenge based on what they're trying to do with what's on the record for Sandhurst, and that's out of our arena, correct?
We are generally not the police for private covenants and restrictions, yes.
Ms. Mucci, you can come up.
I also just think that the point that she was trying to make is they want you to have accurate information. So if you take out that acre or so that is part of Sandhurst, that only one home can be put on, that dramatically reduces the amount of acreage left to put the rest of the 10 homes on, or whatever number it is. So I think that is part of what it is that the information is accurate.
Okay.
Just for clarification, because the difference came to mind, we were looking at consistency, and you presented that to us, but then you also said a mix of uses in the same characterization isn't a bad thing according to what the 2040 zoning plan said. So it's just, I guess, for you, Attorney Grieve, or Attorney Grieve. You're a doctor and an attorney tonight. How about that?
Quite a night for you.
Director?
In your staff's opinion, would it make a difference the way that this has been interpreted as a mix of uses and the size, whether it's Sandhurst or Hunt Cliff? Because I know there's been a lot of tie to Hunt Cliff, the way that like maybe a duplex, maybe not, and it's consistent. But does the Sandhurst element, would that, or does it change things at all based on your staff's interpretation?
It does not for our analysis of the comprehensive plan. This is not an easy one. I'm not gonna lie. I'm very unpopular person at the microphone right now based on the people in the audience, but when we looked at this and we look at the gross density right now, I made a note here, the gross density of the existing 6 units on the 1.59 acres is going to be 3.77 dwelling units per acre. That exists. We can't, as staff, look at that and say it doesn't and sort of, homogenize around it. We have to look at the character. Then we look at the comp plan that calls for, if it was surrounded by, half-acre lots, quarter mile in every direction, then the comp plan, you don't just start inserting that new density. But if you already have a mix of densities there from a 14-acre lot across the street to 3.77 dwelling units per acre and half-acre lots behind that, it's a dynamic density environment. Okay, so we look at it and we say, what does the comp plan say about this? It says when you have these environments, you can continue to infill in these patterns, and you already have an existing pattern here. So to say that that doesn't exist and to say, no, you have to be half-acre lots, does not feel reasonable to staff as an interpretation of the comprehensive plan. That's our opinion. It is what it is.
Just, if you want to talk, you can just step out the door and continue talking. I just want to make sure that we don't interrupt who's speaking. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Just had a lot of questions.
No, please.
One thing I wrote down several times from comments was opposition to high density. I think the term high density was used several times in comments. In your opinion, the staff's analysis, is the 2.7, 3.7 per acre considered high density or in conjunction with what's around there?
Gross density of 2.66 dwelling units per acre is not considered high density in the comp plan. It's more than the RS2, because RS2 is 20,000 square feet. 43,560 is how many square feet are in an acre. So, it's just over 2 dwelling units per acre. But 2.66 in the context of this area, again, I understand. If there weren't 6 units there already at 3.77 dwelling units per acre, we'd be having a different conversation. But at 2.66 gross for the area around it, we don't find that as unreasonable, given many, many policies in the comp plan about infill, housing supply, mixed diversity of housing options, diversity of densities, et cetera, et cetera. It's yeah.
Just to not ignore any of the comments that the public has made, in terms of the NCDOT and the traffic study they did, I know you said that there was nothing that hit anything. What was the basis of that?
Yeah, the basis of that is at 11 dwelling units, you roughly multiply it by 10. That factor varies a little bit depending upon the type of dwelling unit, but ballpark for detached single-family residential is 10 vehicle trips per day, average daily trips, and you would do, at times 11, that's 110, and it just doesn't hit any of the warrants for a TDA, traffic design analysis, or a TIA in the UDO, and NCDOT was not concerned about it either. It didn't trigger anything for them. So that's the basis for that. The triggers are for a TIA is 1,000 total trips or up to 100 AM or PM peak, or 500 average daily through one location, and 50 AM or PM peak. And then for a TDA is 200 trips, and this was at 110. It just didn't. And a TDA is basically just a couple-page analysis done by a transportation engineer.
So even though this number of units did not trigger the need for a full traffic impact analysis, somebody who's a traffic professional did do that couple-page analysis that you mentioned, and
No, because that's not triggered.
oh, they
either.
did not.
No, that's not triggered. That's triggered at 200
So
average daily trips.
Okay. So then who did a traffic professional or somebody with DOT did make the determination though that there was nothing needed, and even though that a TIA didn't lead to that result?
Thank you for the clarification. So we, as part of our routine, send agency referrals to a variety of agencies, including NCDOT. Frequently, their folks will comment back, and the comment we received was that which was quoted on that slide. It said, yeah, this is not, when they come in to modify their permit for their ingress egress, we maybe look at clear vision triangle, but other than that, no turn lanes or anything are warranted.
DOT holds the driveway permit for access to this entire development.
So I have a question for maybe you, Director Grieve, or Mr. Sparrow. It was mentioned that phase one of the original plan, the 1983 plan, there were 2 phases, 10 and 10. 10 units on phase one, 10 units on phase two. Of phase one, 6 units were constructed. Are the 4 remaining structures entitled, or are they on one of these? Is phase one been absorbed by,
Can you zoom in on that?
Try.
so,
Yeah, so you can see here, this was part of the original, but what happened was they built this unit here, which is where you built the first subdivision. And then you have these additional units that, so I don't know if you can see the red X.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that were built. So
Okay.
these 4 units were never constructed.
okay, so those 4 units were actually on your phase two?
And these are not presently entitled because it was rezoned in 2011.
Well, no, I mean, you mean the original tract? Where they did-
1981, this 1981 plan is not, I thought I'd heard your question earlier being, is the 1981 plan, can they still do this?
Physically where the 6 current structures are. That was rezoned in 2000 and what?
No, I don't think it was. No,
That's what I mean.
right.
So the question is, if that wasn't rezoned and they were entitled to 10 in a phase one concept, is that phase one just where these 6 houses are? But it looks like it bleeds over into that top portion there that was the dedication area, was where the other 4 houses were going to go. The map that I just saw. I think we actually have a Phase 1 map in here.
Talking about this?
No, but if you, well, yes, it's on here too. Scroll down. So that's what was, no, I'm sorry, go up. Sorry, wrong direction. That's what was built. And 6 of those were built. But there were 10. That was their Phase 1 at the top of the page. So they built the 6 on the left-hand side of the screen. So the other 4 are actually in this applicant's Phase 2.
And we do have it on.
Yeah.
We have it on page
I think
73.
so they don't have 4 additional housing spots in the original Hunt Cliff subdivision. I'm just trying to make sure there's not a mystery 4 still out there.
I think if you compare side by side right here, I think this is what you're getting at is here you have the red X's are these units here, according to what Jeremy said.
Yeah.
And then these 4 units over here, if you can see my cursor, are probably generally oriented right over here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Roding, I will allow you to speak, but with the understanding that this is not an open meeting and you will be the last person from the public allowed to speak since public comment has closed. It's not closed. I mean, we haven't closed the hearing, but we had a moment for public speaking. I just want to make sure that.
I'll make it real brief.
That's fine. I just want to make it, I wanted to say it before you did, just in case somebody else got up after you, because at this point it would be between us and the developers and then questions for anybody else.
Thank you, and I appreciate you listening to me. 2 things real quickly. As I understand it, I could be wrong, the DOT assessment was done on the housing in that area regarding the traffic. But the realistic part of it is that the traffic is coming from Southern Pines as well. So the traffic greatly exaggerates, if that's the right way to say it, greatly exaggerates. There's a heck of a lot more traffic than just, that's all I want to say. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Part of any DOT analysis there is they're looking at additional houses or units or whatever, but they're using traffic counts that count all of that flow-through traffic too.
Okay, I think there's some confusion about how the HOA, as far as these new potential houses being in character with the existing HOA, and the HOA having, I don't know if I've read the right word, architectural review, but also topography approval rights. If Ms. Smith would like to speak on it, or if the attorney for the developer would like to speak on it, do you all have anything additional to say on how this is going to work between the 2 of you? Microphone.
Back's not what it used to be. Craig Pfeiffer, local attorney, my letter's in the packet that you have. When we look at the original 1981 plat that showed the 20 units, the original restrictive covenants were laid over all of that acreage, which included Lot 17 from the Fouché property. In the 1982, when Phase 1 was platted, that led to an amendment to the restrictive covenants, which was overlaid on all of the property, including 17, Phase 1 and Phase 2. So the restrictive covenants have never been revoked, amended. They apply to the entire acreage. The restrictive covenants have a provision in them that no structure, no improvement of any kind can be completed without approval either of the Board of Directors or an architectural review committee. I don't know if an architectural review committee has been formed. I do know there's a Board of Directors out there. So the idea is that we will present and keep in or within the character of the current development plans. Jeremy will be presenting that to the town, and Ryan is more than willing to either incorporate what's there, which is already underneath the restrictive covenants, into the current association, or if they would prefer the current 6 units, he'll be glad to form a different one. As to the access is shown on all of the lots. The original shows the 2 roadways over the entire area, Fox Run Drive and Saddle Tree Circle. And the restrictive covenants, again, applying to the entirety, provide equal access for ingress, egress, maintenance, construction, utilities to all owners within that property.
Okay, which would,
And I think that might have addressed some of Ms. Peterson's concerns as well. I don't know that it satisfies them, but at least addresses them.
my recommendation, and I'm happy to hear from the council how you feel about this, is that being that the applicant and the HOA only spoke a week ago, and that, I mean, this property at one point all became, or all was one HOA, and that they're going to have architectural review approval over it, which makes me super uncomfortable because I feel like we're being asked to approve something that we don't actually know what it looks like and do not actually have a right to approve. We're giving someone else that right, and I feel like people are expecting us to do it.
How does that work?
Yeah, I have real concerns there. My recommendation would be that the applicant and the HOA go back and talk, come up with character images that they agree upon, and then bring it back to us next month and let us review that as part of this packet, since those architectural images are some that we're just now seeing for the first time. But also that we're,
Second page.
yeah, the second portion of it. But also that we're sort of signing off on somebody else having authority that I don't know how it works.
I think it would modify the architectural character statement to include, instead of consistent with the surrounding character of the community, to renderings or images provided after they have coordinated.
We could administer that, no problem. That is probably the cleanest way to do it. Staff falls short of having felt the authority to say to the applicant, you shall submit 11 renderings or 5 renderings or such and such renderings, but with the town council's acknowledgement that you're not comfortable with it and you're having a hard time making a decision on it, the applicant, and if there's a continuance, the applicant can go back and say, hey, is to get the conditional zoning district, we're looking for a voluntary condition where you show your architecture of your residential structures. Now it comes back to you whenever it's continued, and again, I understand how to administer that and work with the applicant to deliver back to you that what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is perfect. I think some of the other grievances, quote unquote, that the HOA had may also need to be possibly addressed. Everybody's not going to be happy. I understand that, and some things are within law and some things are not. I understand all of that, but if there are grievances that can maybe be fleshed out, worked out between HOA and our developer, I think.
Can you give us, in order to administer those being worked out, I need to know what you have in mind.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm thinking a little bit about the wildlife. I thought a little bit about that the watershed area, and not knowing whether it's gonna be, like a mini pond or what.
Yeah, so is the watershed area, is it going to have water in it all the time, or is it just a sunken grassy area with plants that allows for growth, or that water to flow into it is needed? I mean, I feel like we're arguing over density, that 1981, they approved it to be more dense. In 2011, they approved it to be really close to this density. But the dedication of land to a park, that there's a parcel in between this and the park, which I don't understand who owns that or why you would dedicate land to a park.
Same density on that southern portion of the property, right?
I think so,
And then 3 at the top?
instead of 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I'm a
mean, my
little
biggest
confused.
concern,
You said there's a parcel between.
there's a parcel.
The park, if you look at the little orange line, that is actually a suggested path.
That's not it. Go north,
Yeah.
go that direction.
Well, but
Just show this,
It's yellow, right there.
right? This
is
is the
that?
park.
park, it is adjacent to a portion of it.
You can tell until 3 of those parcels.
The yellow portion, the yellow rectangle?
Not the yellow rectangle, but the green there, what's zoned FRR. So it is adjacent.
The yellow rectangle.
Ingrid?
It's just a little house.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
We own the other one above
Dedicate
it.
land to a park that's a house in the middle of it, it just is bizarre to me.
Park, the drug house, land, and then the lady that lives across the street from our.
It would be adjacent to the park.
Yeah, it's adjacent, but it's just, there's a house in the middle of it. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So, yeah, my biggest concern is really being that it's a conditional zoning request, and we're hoping to keep it in the character of the surrounding neighborhood, is really the character of them, the design, and making sure that we're setting everybody up for success and not, I mean, I feel like approving it as is dangerous because we're asking 2 people who haven't really spoken to get along. I'd like to see them get along before we say, okay. Does that seem fair?
I'm in full listening mode. I appreciate you hearing me. My only feedback is it something we could administer? Do I understand what you want staff to do over the time period you're asking it to do us? And right now, do it. And right now, my answer is yes, I get it. I hear architecture, I hear wildlife. Again, an applicant can come to you with an application for a conditional zoning district and include the architecture of whatever they're voluntarily showing you to get your approval. And so, if it's a continuance, we come back and say, okay, what are your buildings going to look like? And in this case, because what their buildings look like, according to the information from Mr. Pfeiffer, do need to be approved by the HOA, they need to work together to bring in something that pleases you and the HOA.
If they want control, that is true.
If I may I ask a question?
Please.
Thank you. The issue of 2 scenarios to illustrate my question. Ryan walks in with renderings of architecture, and 6 votes say, we don't like that. And he says, well, according to the bylaws, because of maybe how many acres I own, or because of something, I get 20 votes. So guess what? I say yes. That's one scenario. The other scenario is he only owns 2 parcels, and there's 6 parcels, so they say no, and they continue to say no forever because they don't have to play along because they have the votes. I could envision that happening. One of those 2 scenarios or some other version. What is the voting arrangement that exists right now, and how might that be overcome?
Can that be settled between now and next month? The voting arrangement? Okay, I was like, I don't think that we need to use the public meeting as a time to hash it out. If the parties can agree to a voting arrangement, and ideally some architectural renderings that.
The voting arrangement's probably set.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of who gets what votes.
Sir? How does the council feel about a continuation? Yeah, absolutely,
While
yes.
everybody's here. Jeremy, you mentioned in your comments several times, tree save, which I hear to mean your intention is not to clear cut up to the 10-foot buffer. That you have intention, and I know we get into this all the time, there's limitations of what we can and cannot require of you when it's conceptual. But is that your intention to get a plan to where you will not have to just clear cut everything up to the 10-foot buffer and then build on it? If you say tree save, I assume you are intending to hopefully use the land and save what is possible.
That's correct. So that's one of the reasons we're requesting walkouts on that one side where the steep slopes are. That way we can capture the grade, utilizing the house footprint as opposed to flatten everything out and put a slab house on there. That's not the intent of what we're trying to do here.
So these individual houses, though, are going to be owned just like a townhome? Or are they going to have a dedicated lot?
You say townhome, see it as a condo.
Yeah, we had this
scenario.
discussion about if they plan to convey the footprint, it is subdivision, and they know that they need to go through major subdivision preliminary plat. So right now, the way we have it in staff report, when we've had this question is, the structures will be condominiumized and sold under a declaration of unit ownership.
So the association, that would have to be a separate association then, would own the dirt. And you would basically own wall to wall, the owner of the property.
They would own
Be
the-
condominium ownership. All right, let me think.
So it's very similar to how the existing Hunt Cliff community is set up. Like you see on there, the subdivision
Oh, I
of
thought
the
they owned the
footprint.
dirt underneath
They
the
do own
house.
the footprint. The individual owners do own the footprint under there. The common maintenance is for all the exterior.
This is kind of what I was getting at with the,
It is more of a townhouse
with-
situation that currently exists.
with the, maybe it works this way on the condominium ownership too. Is there an amount of this outside of the structure that's going to be considered open space?
Yeah, so everything outside of that footprint would be common area.
And so all of that stuff in open space would fall underneath our newly enacted, well, continued, rather.
Right.
It would not, but we didn't vote on that.
One quick, I think I heard a comment about some of the areas really don't have any trees in some of that buffer area. Would y'all be willing to maybe plant some trees where it's kind of sparse and there's nothing really there?
Actually, before you answer that, what I would recommend maybe is for next, if this is continued, for next month, maybe some photos of what the existing buffer looks like, and then consider planting and bringing us some information on if you'd be willing to plant at next month's meeting. Is that okay with you? Okay.
Did you want to get the opinion of the HOA president about the easement or not?
No, I'd actually rather them hash it out, I think.
In the beautiful green jacket that I'm jealous of. I saw you wave your hand, but I know that our mayor gave us a protocol in terms of continuing the meeting. If you want to say something, you can get us by email, so please don't hesitate. We can't take your comment right now, but please let us know.
If you all would like to continue hearing comments this evening? Yeah, okay. If anyone else in the public would like to have a comment, if this is continued, it will still be a public hearing next month. But if you are here tonight and you've sat through this meeting and you would like to get a comment in, we will accept comments. I think we have somebody who would like to speak. Don't ask yet. Come up to the microphone. Just make sure we can all hear you.
Okay, my name is Bobby Hartig. My home is 108 Canterbury Road. Some of these maps, especially with me, I'm probably the oldest person here, it's very hard to see them as you're talking about them. And I wanted to know if we could have copies of some of these plans so we know what's.
I think everything is
you're planning.
available.
I'm sorry?
Everything is available in our planning office. If you would like to go by and get copies of it.
One.
Yes.
And online.
It is all available online. Yep. And here is our address and phone number. And if you'd like to stop by, we can print anything you want us to print.
I just, I want to recap a little bit of what I think I've heard is the direction is like you'd like to see the applicant and the HOA basically get along, come together with some type of general architectural plans. Include that in the package next month. If there is the desire to exclude this piece of property from the HOA, then I guess we would need to know that too, and then there wouldn't, right?
It sounds like even if it's excluded from the HOA at this point still has architectural review.
Well, unless they just abdicated it.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, come back with how it works. Absolutely, yes. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Ryan Pascal, and I live at 330 Mile Away Lane in Southern Pines. One thing that I wanted to make clear is that my original concept for starting a new HOA instead of incorporating these new units into the existing HOA is because I was under the impression that they weren't paying into a monthly fund. And of course, with my new units, there will be a monthly charge associated with the HOA. So I did not think that they would want to pay the amount that would be needed going forward. I don't know much about HOAs. I've never set one up, but I assume it would be $200-300 a month, which is pretty significant if you're not used to paying that. Assuming the current HOA is okay with paying the same amount as the new units, then I don't have any problem at all with sticking with one HOA as opposed to starting a second one. I'd prefer it. I'm sure it'll save me money in setting that up. One thing that I would like to mention in terms of architectural designs, I think the easiest thing in the world for me to do would be to ask for 14 units and build them exactly the same as what's already there. And that seems like it would be really easy to agree on. But we are reducing the amount of units that we're seeking here. And additionally, I looked for these plans that the current units used to build back when they were built by McDonald Brothers. And we got up with Ed Rhodes, who had a part in this original design. And he said that he couldn't find the plans, but that is something that came to my mind, was to build exactly what's there. We're not trying to do anything crazy. And just another note about, just to clarify about duplexes versus single family. I'm inclined to build all single family because I do believe that they'll be worth more in the end than a duplex unit would be worth. There'd be some savings with a duplex, but in the end, I think that the added value of a single-family dwelling is going to be worth the extra expense of building it separate from a duplex. I just wanted to mention, in terms of one comment that one of the neighbors said, is that currently Hunt Cliff is very nice, it's very cute. And like I just said a minute ago, we're proposing less density than the original design. So, you know, is it going to take a while for trees to grow and this look cute? Yes, that's just going to happen anywhere. But this can be just as cute as what's already there and look just as proper in the site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, do you have any other comments? If you all are comfortable with a continuance, will someone please make that motion?
I may just clarify before the motion occurs. Right now, what I've got on my list to work on for the next month is architecture, wildlife, and tree save / buffer clarity.
Say that one more time.
Issues related to architecture, issues related to wildlife from Deborah, and issues related to preserving trees and the issue of the buffer around the 10-foot buffer. If it's an undisturbed buffer, but there's nothing there anyways, just take a closer look at that about whether it's going to get replanted or something like that.
Well, it just doesn't really call it open space on the plan, does it?
It calls it the 10-foot, it does call it out as 10-foot landscape buffer, and then in parentheses it says undisturbed. And so
So I mean,
undisturbed,
all of the area outside of the building footprint is open space.
it does
ish.
not no, it does not call out all of the common area as open space, yeah. And so, you know, the issue right now would be technically under the way this is designed, yes, I understand, again, there's a lot of things that are said at meetings that are the best of intentions, but later, when we're administering things, we know there's a 10-foot undisturbed buffer. We know if there's nothing there right now, undisturbed means you just leave it alone, and there's no trees. You don't plant something there. A 10-foot or larger buffer, proper noun buffer, now means planted to our buffer standard, because that's a thing in the UDO. But then if you say planted, then sometimes that means everything gets cut down. So we can work with that. We understand your intention, and we'll get that with the applicant about the intention, we believe, is to save whatever's there. And if there's nothing there, plant something to make it better and have it be there in order to enhance the character, much like we did with Bethesda last month with the buffer off of Bethesda.
Yep.
Yep, understood.
And if there's no meeting of the minds, I mean, we can still act next month regardless.
If there's no meeting of the minds, I want some real clarity on how, like, what authority we are giving to the HOA to approve architectural review and how that's going to function. Just so that we're not signing off on something that is going to be a disaster.
Yeah, right now, I don't know if one side or the other has a controlling vote such that things could never go anywhere or something could get approved without that consensus. So clarity on that would be great, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments or questions? Staff, thank you for clarifying those things. Of course.
Make a motion to continue the hearing for Z-07-24 to our next business meeting on April.
Could I just ask one last thing?
Just come to the microphone to do so.
Whenever we did speak last week, I offered to meet on the property Wednesday or Thursday of last week. And Ms. Smith couldn't get enough responses to schedule a meeting with me, even though I was willing to. So that makes me just a little bit concerned about the ability to get together. So I would hope that if I make an effort and there is no meeting, I would hope we could proceed.
Yeah, I would say bring, if an effort is made on either part and it doesn't work towards a solution, bring that to our next meeting and we will.
That's what I was bringing up about if there's nothing that happens, we can still act.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith, would you like to speak again? Yes. Just come up to the microphone, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Take your time.
And just to clarify, some of our owners actually live out of town. So to have a meeting at that time, this was on Tuesday, and wanting to meet on Wednesday or Thursday, just an impossibility. We've got homeowners in Virginia and that work out of state and elsewhere, so it just was not possible.
Right.
Yes.
Is it feasible that you can represent those homeowners that live
We
out of
can get-
town and
yes.
just meet with the, yeah?
Yes,
Okay.
we would have to get the votes for that. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, you have a date for April?
Again, I'll make a motion to continue this hearing for Z-07-24 to our regular business meeting on April the 8th, 2025.
I second that.
By saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you guys, everyone in attendance. We appreciate when the community is involved and hopefully are working towards a better solution for that corner. Moving on to action items, we have the dedication of Southern Road.
Thank you, guys.
Yep. Do you guys need a break? Do you want a break?
I want someone to go get somebody else's.
All right, 5-minute break. We'll come back at when that clock says 8:30.
that we can still take. I don't know. It's a policy. Oh, no.
I assume.
It hasn't been done in a long time.
The mom and me always, take care, take care. Take care of everybody.
Okay, I apologize for the extra. Our YouTube viewers, all 6 of them. Okay. Okay, coming back to our meeting. We are now considering RD-01-25, the dedication for Southern Road. And I believe Director Grieve is going to speak to us.
And town manager Reagan Carson.
It's okay, is it you? Are you talking about Southern Road? Okay, great.
Good evening, members of council. My name is BJ Grieve. I'm with the Town of Southern Pines Planning Department. I have the distinct pleasure this evening of presenting to you a petition for acceptance of Southern Road, the latest addition to our collection of roads in the Morgan Park South development. This is where BJ's Gas is. This is Southern Road, kind of a close-up. Where this is located is just on the southwest side of the new BJ's. And I'm going to show you some more drone pictures here, but this is Carolina Green. Oh, let me get out of this so I can actually do it this way. This is Carolina Green Parkway. Carolina Green Parkway has already been accepted by the town. This is Southern Road over here that has already been accepted by the town. This is already on the Powell bill. It has historically ended right here. This is where Brick's Pizza is. This is Kohl's right here, and you're going to see that in a moment. So this is where Southern Road is now. This is the end of it, where it used to, the road coming the other way used to be right here. So this is what has been petitioned for acceptance, and you have before you a resolution to do that. And in case you want one last view of kind of the whole Southern Road, here is Brucewood on the right. Here is Southern Road now as it comes in. It used to end in the woods right back here, and now it connects through and comes out to the roundabout right here. So this is the entirety now of Southern Road.
I have no problem with accepting the dedication, but I do have a question, just for clarification. Southern Road was not one that we paid for, so it's not part of the MSD. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Like, we didn't pay.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the payment. It is within lands that are part of the MSD, but it was not part of what we paid for the parkway.
Pay off.
No, that is correct. This is purely paid for by the developer, being dedicated to the town.
MSD, it's in the district.
Within the district. Yes,
So
because it serves both the
revenue
BJ's
raised.
tract and, exactly.
So monies can be.
Can be used there.
Can be spent there, yes.
Thank you.
It's a great question. Any other questions for staff?
Town engineer James Mickle did text and confirm today that the road is good to go for acceptance. Everything is solid.
Up to our standards. Is there a motion to accept that dedication?
I'll make a move. Oh, go ahead. You got it, Brandon. Take it.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, opposition to NC Senate Bill 382 regarding the zoning authority of local governments. Would you like to speak on it?
I will simply offer, this was sent last week to the managers in Pinehurst, Southern Pines, and Aberdeen as a result of conversation that took place at a Tri-City meeting last month. I think the resolution speaks for itself. I think we're all aware of the challenges with Senate Bill 382. I spoke with the mayor on this and placed it on the agenda for council consideration to then be forwarded to the various members of our delegation here in Southern Moore County and anyone else at either the legislature or elsewhere that the council would so direct that we get this sent to.
Thank you. I will say, Reagan and I both missed the mayor-manager's meeting this month, but as of February, it came up, and all of the mayors, managers of municipalities in Moore County oppose, at least in conversation, Senate Bill 382. So I appreciate that it was sent to us, and I would ask that you, consider agreeing to us signing this, asking our state delegates, local delegates at the state level to oppose it. Do you all have any questions about it?
I have no objection.
Okay. Is there a motion?
All right, I'll move that we approve a consideration for a resolution in opposition to Senate Bill 382.
All those in favor vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I've been told that something will happen, but until that happens, we are stuck with the first two things on our legislative public hearings, just in holding until that time. So as much as we can do to move forward with it being updated and us having some zoning authority would be beneficial to us, I think. Okay, so please.
Your planning team and the balance that we try very hard to achieve every day between private property rights and community development and guiding good growth and development. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for the information that you've provided to us as far as getting this updated and that so many municipalities are asking for exception to it.
And thank you for being so open to
counties.
hear us and to respect our views, even if they're not well-informed, but.
Just know that we work really hard on balance, making sure that it doesn't err too much. I mean, it's an extraordinarily fine line. We work really hard on that day in and day out to make sure we don't err too much one way or the other. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, revisiting the code revision to permit off-premises alcohol sales at farmers markets. Would you like to speak, Assistant Manager Roth? I mean, like, getting all the titles in there without rushing them. Okay.
Not a doctor.
Good evening. Since the workshop where we presented that we had received a request from James Creek Cider House to consider permitting them to sell closed bottles of alcohol at our farmers market, we had a pretty robust discussion, and council asked us to go back and prepare an ordinance that would amend our code to allow for that. So that is what is in your packet. And I just wanted to call out, there's really 5 specific conditions and provisions under which they would need to operate. So I just wanted to highlight those. And these will all be going in a new section of the code. It would be section 112.05, which is actually a section we have devoted to the farmers market. So it's very clear that this is for the farmers market only. So those 5 conditions are that they have the proper permits from the alcohol beverage control, and that they're valid and timely, and that they display those at our market. The second condition is that they only may sell malt beverages, fortified wine, and unfortified wine. So distilled spirits would not be permitted at the farmers market. There was also some question around tastings, so I clarified that and stated that tastings for the purpose of offering a sample are not permitted. We do understand that some vendors may offer small tastings in very small bottles, so that would be permitted, but in terms of actually opening a bottle and allowing them to consume on the premises, that would not. They have to display signage informing customers that they cannot open and consume the alcohol at the market. And then the last provision states that this is only for a farmers market event that has an operating agreement with the town. And right now, the Moore County Farmers Market organization, they are a 501c3. They are the only entity that has that agreement with us. And so that is to protect that event and not allow any person or organizer to, quote unquote, have a farmer's market and start allowing them around, our parks or things like that. So I did share the proposed ordinance with both Sue Mashburn, who is she's the head of the farmers market, and she was unable to attend tonight, but she did say that she supports it and that they would welcome James Creek to apply. James Creek was actually in attendance tonight. I think they got maybe confused about the comments and moving the agenda, but they're very appreciative too, and so they were here to advocate.
I didn't realize that, and I didn't know they were here, so.
Yeah,
sorry
they
about
are.
that.
So they're very excited about that and intend to follow through.
Sorry, we
with
didn't
that.
have an opportunity to hear them.
So thank you for that, and I would have explained to them why I moved it. It wasn't anything against them. We want them to succeed and are excited for them to be a part of the farmer's market. I just want to be clear for anybody that was watching or following this, that this is very, very limited in scope for the specific reasons and purposes expressed, and is not opening any kind of avenue for additional alcohol sales all over town. And I just wanted it to be very clear that this was very, very limited. And so thank you for clarifying that again.
Something that one of my council members said to me earlier was, this is sort of a movement on our part to sort of help the farmers market function more like a grocery store that is able to sell a beer or wine item, which I think is, I know we can't limit it to local vendors, but where we are able to support local farmers and local makers, I think it's good we can do so.
In response to your comment last time about that, I was looking on the farmers market website, and they do proudly state that they are a producer-only market and that their vendors are typically within 50 miles of here. So I don't know that it's a requirement for them, but that is what they seek.
Working to control that, and, okay, very good.
So with all that being said, I will make a motion that we approve ordinance number 3108.
Second.
All those in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we are on to adjourning the meeting. Are there any other comments for the good of the public or the council? All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. 8:43, meeting is adjourned. See you all April 8th.
Hey, I mean, when you're not here,
Did you?
Bill showed up just to see me. Bill ran us through that thing.
I set it up.
A little bit. All right.